Great. Welcome everyone to our Tuesday, February 8th, 2022 regular closed session meeting of the EBMUD Board of Directors. In accordance with Government Code Section 54953E, this meeting will be conducted by webinar and teleconference only. A physical location will not be provided for this meeting. All directors, including myself, are participating remotely. Roll call, please, Madam Secretary.
Director Coleman.
Present.
Director Katz.
Present.
Director McIntosh.
Here.
Director Mellon.
Present.
Director Patterson.
Present.
Director Young will be joining us, and President Lenny.
Here. All right, so we are now at public comment. So if members of the public wish to make a public comment, please raise your hand or use the raise your hand feature in Zoom. When prompted, please state your name, affiliation if applicable, and topic. Please refrain from providing personal information such as addresses or phone numbers during public comment. If you need this information, or if we need this information, we will have you contact staff. The secretary will call each speaker in the order received. Each speaker is allocated 3 minutes to speak. However, I have the discretion to amend this time based on the number of speakers.
Can I just add that I was here during the roll call, but frantically waving my hands, but you couldn't see me.
Noted. The secretary will track time and inform each speaker when the allocated time has concluded. All right, do we have any speakers for public comment?
We do. We have Eric Larson. And your 3 minutes will start now, Eric.
Thank you, Risha. Good morning, President Lenny, board members, and President General Manager Chan. Are we there yet? There's a common refrain I'm hearing of negotiations. But if we've got a long ways to go, and you drag your feet all the way, it's going to take a long time to get there. We've been at negotiations for over a year, but your negotiator has only been available 3 hours a week for most negotiation meetings, and management has been ill-prepared to respond to our proposals. I've come to you throughout the summer when the manager of HR, who was supposed to be at our table to address non-economic proposals, took a 3-week vacation in July. I complained to you throughout the year that the district's negotiator was only available half days and that managers were not allocating resources to respond to us. And I'm guessing that it was you who told management to slow walk wages. In September, we cleared our table, reducing our proposals to just a dozen of our most important so management could move, but they remained stuck on their terms for fatigue time and vacuum excavator operations, entirely new and complex articles for which we repeatedly showed the failings. It was not until December that management even considered our fatigue time proposal, a proposal whose origin lies in safety and in the arbitrator's ruling telling the union and the district to resolve the language at the negotiations table. We were in the midst of negotiating this new language and new vacuum excavator language and other unresolved non-economic issues when management blindsided us with a last best and final package with their terms on all of these articles. It is not good faith bargaining when management comes to the table late, then does not give us the opportunity to fairly conclude our issues by trapping us in their terms with an all or nothing package. Now we're at the 11th hour, or maybe it's midnight. Our wage package may fall short of inflation. Our workforce are frustrated by rising costs, and non-economic items still need to be pulled, still unaddressed. Heavy equipment operators and paving crew foremen are still underpaid with salaries compared to that of Napa and Sonoma. Grounds maintenance are still unrecognized for the additional fire abatement work they are charged with. Janitors are still unrecognized for the additional COVID sanitation duties they have. We don't want to go to impasse with unfair labor practice charges for failing to bargain with non-economic issues an arbitrator told you to resolve at negotiations. We want a fair wage package that helps keep up with inflation. We want our outstanding equity adjustments addressed, and most of all, we want to be treated fairly and with respect. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric.
Next, we have John Kellett. You should be able to unmute your mic. Your 3 minutes will start now.
Yes, thank you, Risha. Thank you, board members, for listening to me today. My name is John Kellett. I'm a grounds maintenance specialist 2 here at EBMUD. As I've spoken with you guys before, us grounds maintenance specialists, we're at the forefront of protecting district infrastructure through really complex projects of vegetation management and fire or fuel abatement. We've asked for an equity adjustment to bring our wages closer to what other entities pay, such as Contra Costa Water, Alameda County Water, Valley Water, which are paying significantly more than what we make. It's been frustrating through this process because there hasn't been an engagement in conversation. We spent a lot of time putting together a wage proposal, putting together comparable agencies, and presented that package to the negotiations team, and all we were told was no. I would implore you to try to get your negotiations team to at least engage us in a conversation about why, or what we could do better, or how. And that comes from grounds maintenance specialists, and it comes from a lot of other work groups that have tried to engage in a conversation asking for an equity adjustment and just been simply shut off and told no. That's frustrating from our point of view. So hopefully you guys can take that constructive criticism and maybe give a little bit of more insight to your negotiations team, just to talk to us about it more, because, you know, you guys are at a real precipice here of a very important time in the labor market. It's becoming very hard to hire good trades workers anymore. I see it in all kinds of different trades, from home construction to solar to heavy equipment operation. The labor market and the candidate pool is dwindling, and you guys have a chance here to hire some really good workers if you're able to raise our wages, because that's what people want, especially living here in the Bay Area. They just want to get paid better so that they can keep their families here and work for a great company like EBMUD. So I think you guys have a lot of power to be able to negotiate that, and tell your negotiators to talk to us a little bit more, to be able to really keep and retain some good employees, and also be able to hire some really good employees in the trades, because the candidate pool is really dwindling. So with that, that's all I have about grounds maintenance. I would also just like to say that all us grounds maintenance workers and painters, we all support the union stance. We stand in solidarity with 444, with our brothers and sisters, and we know we're really close on this contract negotiation, and we hope you can go the extra step to be able to make it a good package for us to retain the employees and also keep the water operations running. Thank you for your time. I wish you a nice day.
Thank you, John.
Next, we have John Hayden. John, you should be able to unmute your mic, and your 3 minutes will start now.
Thank you, Risha. Good morning, all. It gives me great regret to note the passing of friend, colleague, and mentor David Richardson last night. Sorry. And I respectfully ask the board to open the afternoon session with a moment of silence in his honor. Sorry to inform you, if you haven't heard, David was a great man. Thank you.
Thank you, John. And we are planning to close this afternoon session in honor of David.
I didn't know, John. Thanks for letting us know.
Next, we have Teresa Soto. Teresa, you should be able to unmute your mic. Teresa Soto, you should be able to unmute your mic.
I'm sorry, I finally figured it out.
Okay, and your 3 minutes will start now.
Thank you. My name is Teresa Soto. I'm a janitor here with EBMUD. I've worked for the district for 28 years. I represent myself and the janitorial department. We feel very disrespected that we have not been acknowledged for all the hard work we have given to the district over the years. Whenever the district wants to save money, seems like they do it on our backs. In 1994, they Y-rated us and lowered us a step from 45 to 44. Then they canceled outside contractors who were doing remote facilities, because they wanted to save money, and gave us the work with no additional staff. We took on the challenge. Then the district tried to take our shift differential. We fought that and we managed to keep it. We also have people retiring, and we lost those positions once people retired or moved out. Yet we keep continuing the work with due diligence. We've encountered so many challenges, homeless, outside trash, RVs, needles, having to handle urine and feces. Along with COVID, I personally have had to take out contaminated trash from the testing sites with positive COVID tests in them. Not only that, just at the facilities and remote sites, downtown and AMC, we encounter a lot of hazards, people approaching, and threats. We're just asking to be taken back to the one step we had before. And again, we've also been asked at COVID to disinfect. Who's the first ones that are called? The janitors. We go into the hot spots, we disinfect. We've been asked to disinfect inside vehicles. We've also been asked to disinfect heavy equipment such as bulldozers. We are essential workers. We deserve and we have earned an equity adjustment. Thank you.
Thank you, Teresa.
Next, we have Stella Tan. Stella, you should be able to unmute your mic. And your 3 minutes start now.
Thank you, Risha. Hello, Board President Linney, board members, and General Manager Chan. My name is Stella Tan. I'm the civil engineer in the engineering department, and I've spoken with you before. I'm here to speak about the ongoing contract negotiations. I support 2019 wage proposal, and I'm asking that the board give management's lead negotiator more authority so that our wage and equity proposals can be accepted. I'd like to echo the request for equity adjustments and also request the following adjustments to the proposal. Please address the inequity between PEPRA and pre-PEPRA staff by allowing a higher dollar amount match for deferred compensation. Please also allow a higher CPI component for wage increases in years 3 and 4. This CPI increase helps account for the dramatic increase in costs of living in the Bay Area that is not captured in inflation. I hope we can come to an agreement on an equitable and staff-considerate contract soon. Thank you for your time.
All right, thank you, Stella.
Next, we have Kelly A. Kelly, you should be able to unmute your mic.
Hi, thank you very much. I'd like to direct your attention to the agenda, and we have today Brown Act training and briefing and ethics. So, clearly last time around, a year ago, whenever you got trained, some members of this board got the wrong message about the Brown Act and didn't learn what the Brown Act is. They had this idea buried deep inside their guts that that in-district residence is a prerequisite for hearing from the public. It's not. Read the Brown Act. They wanted to exclude outsiders, and they defended their chauvinistic and territorial notions of not wanting to hear from people outside the district. It was despicable. It was shameful, but that's how they think, And I really think that the Brown Act briefing needs to go over that today. Get these people to back off and learn about that chauvinism and territoriality will no longer be allowed. And then there's another part of the Brown Act, which some other government agencies, I haven't seen the East Bay MUD do this yet, but the County Board of Supervisors, Alameda County, they'll hold scheduled meetings, regular meetings, every week, every month, whatever. And they'll post the time. Of course, they'll immediately go into closed session for a couple of hours, on random number of hours, and then come out of the closed session. And the public never knows when the open meeting actually starts. That's a nice way to bypass the Brown Act, and I would urge you not to do that. Also, you talk about the ethics policy for your board. The County Board of Supervisors committed to creating an ethics policy for county employees. It has never materialized, even though they committed to looking at it. And then there's another thing which I would warn you against doing, another violation of the Brown Act, which I have seen an unnamed elected official do, not in East Bay MUD, but I urge you not to do this. They went to staff at a meeting, unagendized part of the meeting, and they said, hey, there's a problem. Look at this problem. Isn't this terrible? Why isn't anybody doing anything about this? And staff was there listening attentively, of course. And a few weeks later, they went out and physically built a solution to the problem, a set of barricades, actually. And this, in response to that particular problem, it was an embarrassment because clearly the decision was taken during an unagendized, unnoticed, the elected officials were giving instructions to staff, going off leash, as it were, and without noticing the public. Again, that's part of the Brown Act. So yeah, please pay attention this time around when you hear about the Brown Act, please, and think about these issues of not excluding outsiders. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. Do you mind if I ask, is there an instance where we have excluded people from outside the comment from making comments or getting materials from us for things that we do?
Well, certainly you've sent me emails, members of your board, and I'll send you the copies of those emails. And they were quite aggressively defensive is the most charitable way to put it, or perhaps openly hostile to receiving input from outsiders. Openly hostile is certainly a very charitable way to put it. And I decry that sentiment in those emails. And it's all there on paper. So I'll send it to you, Director Linney.
Thank you. All right, thank you for your comments.
Next, we have Jason Konapa. You should be able to unmute your mic. Jason, and your 3 minutes.
Members.
Yes, your 3 minutes start now.
Thank you. I'm here along with the rest of 2019 to just request that we get these negotiations done. We get some charitable, equitable returns and bring the negotiators back. It seems like everything happened a little too quick. Thing that I'd like to note, and this is just a personal opinion, but after attending these board meetings, I feel like the board's out of touch. And a great example is right now your employees are speaking to you and almost every single one of you is doing something else. You're either sending an email, you're working on something. I mean, we can see you on the video. We can see your eyes going back and forth. And I mean, it doesn't feel like you're listening to us. And I don't know if that affects other people. I don't know if you're taking notes. I mean, again, I don't know what's going on. But when we're sitting here and I'm watching everybody tell you about their lives, try and talk to the people that are supposed to be the decision makers. We're coming to you as employees because we love our job, we love our position, we love the people that we work for, we want to make it better. And it really feels like the words are falling on deaf ears. And I don't know how to remedy that. Again, it could just be my personal opinion. Maybe I'm picking up on some things wrong, but it just doesn't feel like the board is listening to us. And it doesn't appear that the board even cares when we speak. And again, like I said, I don't know how to remedy that. I'd really like to see negotiations come back. I'd like to see policies that are for the employee. And I'd like to see the division, I'd like to see everything go away. I'd like to have everybody happy again and be glad to be here and not have animosity towards the people that are essentially governing us. Please come back. Please have fair and honest, equitable negotiations. Please remember that we're the ones that are out here doing the work. We've done it willingly and without problem throughout the pandemic. We want to continue. We want to provide good service, and we want to be here. And please come back with some equitable negotiations. Thank you, guys. Have a fantastic day.
Jason, thank you for your comments. And I appreciate the feedback. I will just say a couple things. One, I think Zoom makes it challenging for us to have the same kind of interaction that we do in person. For one thing, we can't see you, and so and you obviously can't see what I'm taking notes when I'm looking off screen. I have another computer. I'm taking notes from everyone who's spoken here, and so it may look like I'm distracted or looking somewhere else. But that's for me. I do think that we do hear comments from. I mean, the third thing I was going to say, I'm sorry, is that for the most part we can't comment on items that are brought to us, but we do listen attentively, and I think the impact of employees coming here has been substantial, to say the least, and affecting the way that we have considered those comments in how we've had discussions in closed session and also in the open session meetings and stuff. So I know that I've felt it here. I've tried to recognize everyone that comes here and thank them for their comments, to let them know that, again, in the absence of being in the same room and being able to look at each other eye to eye, which even right now I can't do with you, it makes it a challenging experience. And I thank you for your patience and your comments that way.
Next, we have Brandon Battiati. Brandon, you should be able to unmute your mic. And your 3 minutes start now.
Thank you. Hello, President Linney, members of the board, General Manager Chan, and everyone else attending. My name is Brandon Battiati. I'm a plumber 4 and the second vice president of Local 444. I'm here today to talk about negotiations. We have worked together and come a long way, but there are still some sticking points that are keeping us from passing the negotiation finish line. And I'm here to talk about one of them. Heavy equipment operator equity adjustments. They deserve a 5% increase without the addition of crane certification to their job description. As of now, the district has trouble getting and keeping qualified operators to do the job. From 2017 to now, we have lost 6 before their probation was over because they couldn't cut it. 4 resigned their probation was over, before their probation was over, and 1 quit after completing probation. That there shows we can't get qualified HEOs and can't keep some that pass probation. So to add a crane certification to a position that we are already struggling to get and keep seems unproductive. Here's some information about cranes and crane certs. At the HEO current salary for 3 days, which is how many days the training and testing is, and the cost of training, it works out to be about $3,332.72 a person. We have 56 HEOs at the district. So that's $186,632.32 every 5 years, because every 5 years they have to get recertified. So we're paying to train HEOs, like I said, $186,632.32 for a piece of equipment the district doesn't own. We don't own a large crane. Every time we want to use one, we have to rent one. And we employ 2 heavy equipment operators to date. And from the research I've done, those 2 heavy equipment operators are those 2 crane operators are more than efficient to run the cranes that we have to rent periodically. We do in fact own carry decks, which we use in pipeline, and that's a type of a crane that the district is in the process of getting rid of, and now they're using excavators because it's more efficient and safer to install the pipe in the ground. So back to the cost. To us, that is a waste of funds that can be used for getting more pipe in the ground or using for other capital projects. So to wrap up, the operators deserve a 5% equity adjustment without the addition of crane certification. Another point of information, when operators come here from the outside, majority of the time, they're taking a pay cut. And along with taking a pay cut, now they also have to go and get their Class A, which affects their personal life, because when you have a Class A, your restrictions are different. So if you want qualified operators, they need a 5% increase. Thank you.
Thank you, Brandon.
Next, we have Yvette Rivera. Yvette, you should be able to unmute your mic. And your 3 minutes will start now.
Thank you, Risha. I just want to start off by telling Jason, I appreciate what you said about several members of the board not being engaged while employees at the district are making their presentations. We can all see what board members are which board members are turning off their cameras. It's obvious. So thank you, Jason, for bringing that up. And obviously, the district doesn't want to see your face. The district does not want to see employees' faces as we present our concerns, because they could just turn on the camera. They have the ability to engage that feature in Zoom, but they don't care. Now to my talk. The last board meeting, Mark Carradine, Director Lisa McIntosh, and George Cleveland expressed their outrage about several district employment practices. Mark Carradine expressed, I'll bet tempered, outrage about all the racism and discrimination he's experienced at the district for over 30 years. Lisa McIntosh passionately expressed her outrage at a recent recruitment practice and outcome. And a lot of us assume which recruitment she was referring to. Finally, I heard George Cleveland, the union officer, express outrage of what he perceived as the district's disparate treatment of a woman that has cancer, and how the present general counsel, Derek McDonald, and his staff, and I assume that's the employment attorney at EBMUD, Lourdes Matthews, how they had no problem dishing out a significant outcome, a significant action against this woman, but not for the man who is also being held accountable for his actions. And as I was listening to all that outrage, I was really wondering where all that outrage was for Ariel Bland and Saji Pierce. Where was all that outrage when they were filing their internal complaints against Craig Spencer and Laura Costa, or when they filed their tort complaint, or when they filed their lawsuit? I waited, and a part of me feels like maybe the board, maybe each district member is just on a need-to-know basis regarding the grisly details of this lawsuit. I mean, I was involved on the district side with lawsuits, with investigations. I never got to see the complaints. All I got to see was a declaration that I was supposed to sign. So because of that, I'm going to continue reading from tort complaints, from discrimination complaints, from lawsuits. And specifically, I'm going to focus on Ariel Bland and Saji Pierce's. I'm just going to read a couple of lines from Ariel Bland's tort complaint. And paragraph 4, I'll be ending mid-sentence as soon as Risha lets me know when my time is up.
Yvette, your time
The interviews.
Yvette, your time was up, so if you could summarize quickly.
Thank you, Risha.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm gonna go ahead and finish, and I'll continue at this afternoon meeting. Thank you for this time. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Next, we have Joey Smith. Joey, you should be able to unmute your mic. And your 3 minutes start now.
Thank you, Risha. Good morning to you, President Linney, Vice President Coleman, Board, General Manager Chan, and staff. This has been one of the most interesting years I have spent here since 1992. I am currently the president of Local 2019, and I serve on our contract negotiation team. This team has put in a lot of work. No way in the world could we have gotten this far without our members who have had previous experience and without the new energy of those who had not served at the table previously. We believe that we are speaking on behalf of our membership, the majority of the membership anyway, when we say that the fact that we have staff who work in positions such as account clerks, construction inspectors, field reps, graphic designers, housekeepers, laboratory techs, rangers, system programmers, water system planning analysts, and some of every other job description in between. Meaningful raises are what makes it possible for them to stay here at EBMUD and be able to live in the area. I encourage the board to give the nod to accept the last proposal that we presented so that we will be able to keep excellent employees here where they want to be, working for EBMUD. We want EBMUD to turn back into Mother Mud and stop just being referred to as the district. We want to be able to know that those who came after 2013 will be able to stay as long as they desire to continue to work here because they can afford to live here. So please accept our proposal. And it's not that we don't have other work to do. There's plenty of other things for us to handle as far as what's going on at the district. But it's a great place to be, and most of us want to stay here. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Joey. Appreciate your comments.
Next, we have Zubin, engineer. Zubin, you should be able to unmute your mic. And your 3 minutes start now.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, my name is Zubin, and I'm here to encourage the board to give a fair equity adjustment for the plant maintenance mechanics at the wastewater treatment plant. In order for EBMUD to perform its core mission of serving 740,000 customers, protecting the Bay and the 7 million people that live in the region, I believe we need to remain an innovator at the forefront of this industry. In order to do this, we need to recruit and retain well-trained, multi-talented, and experienced staff. We have been unable to do so in the mechanical shop at the wastewater treatment plant. For example, myself, I was hired in June of 21, along with 3 others, 2 of which have since left due to suppressed wages and the high cost of living in the East Bay. The other 2, so they turned to the list to try to rehire, and the other 2 that were left on the list both declined the position, which has now forced another recruitment process, which is time consuming and costly. So with that being said, in order to increase our chances of hiring and retaining top-notch talent and create a happy and healthy workplace, plant maintenance mechanics reasonably require an equity adjustment. So just in closing, I encourage the board to offer a fair and equitable adjustment and set East Bay Mud at the forefront of the industry. Thank you.
Thank you, Zubin.
Next, we have Patrick Virgin. Pat, you should be able to unmute your mic. Your 3 minutes start now.
Good afternoon, board and members, Risha and General Manager Chan. My name is Patrick Virgin. I'm a plant maintenance mechanic at SD1. I've been with East Bay Mud for just under 34 years. What like to go on with what Zubin said is we have 3 current openings we have to try to fill. It's been difficult. We've had over the last few years not been able to get anybody qualified out of the pool, or one person maybe. We have in the next year 3 or most likely 4 mechanics that all are well over 25 years leaving within the next year. We have right now 5 or 6 of the mechanics have less than 2 years seniority. That's going to put us at out of 21 mechanics, about 12 of them with less than 2 years of district time. That is not, they're good guys that are there, but that is going to not have, we're not going to have people that are going to be able to grasp every facet of our jobs working in water reclamation at RARE, the North Richmond Water Reclamation Facility, the new logistics that we have for regulatory compliance at all the wet weather treatment plants. It's a very diverse, we're not able to focus on one little thing, and we deserve a equity adjustment to bring people in and to get qualified people within our classification. And the work that we have, it has gotten more. We've gotten to where we have to do a lot more work than we used to. We're not asking for a lot. We're asking just to be made whole and to be brought forth. Thank you. And also, I would like to speak on behalf of the janitorial staff. They are one of the lowest paid classes that you have at the district. And they're one of the ones that have put their lives on the line, keeping your offices and my locker room clean. You need to give them their equity adjustment raise, and please take that into consideration. They deserve it. They've put a lot on the line the last 2 years and with very little gratitude. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick.
Next, we have George Cleveland. George, you should be able to unmute your mic. Your 3 minutes start now.
Thank you, Risha. I knew it was going to come to me just as I was eating my lunch. I'm George Cleveland. I'm the Chief Steward of Local 2019. I'm not talking about negotiations because you've heard everything that's been said and I support it all. When I was here last time, I was, how can I put it? Intense, maybe, and talked about a lot of things. Want to let folks know that the person who was terminated, or we're working with employee relations to get the person back employed by the district. So that's a good thing. But in my speech, I think I went a bit too far in a couple of things. So I need to apologize to Kelly Zito because she didn't have anything to do with any of this. It was just people did what they did and she had nothing to do with it. I understand she probably wasn't even here when most of it was going on. And also to the general counsel, Derek Donald, because the comment about potentially being a sexist thing, I don't think it was. It's just a happenstance where it just happened to be that the 3/4 of the people who were involved in this happened to be women. So it just was. It's not a sexist thing. So if I put that out there, I apologize for that as well to both Ms. Zito and Mr. McDonald. That's pretty much what I have to say. Although one last thing, I am concerned, I've brought this up before, we have our Skelly process, and I think it's not quite as transparent as it could be, because when we're on the receiving end, and we're never entirely sure where the direction is coming from, because it's on the management side, it's a combination of employee relations, the department to which the employee belongs, and the general counsel, because it's a legal matter. So we're always a little bit kind of put off as to who is driving that process and who's determining what the punishment is. So maybe that can be worked on. But the rest, again, I do apologize to Ms. Zito and Mr. McDonald, and that's all I have to say. Thank you, Director Linney, members of the board, and General Manager Chan for your time.
Thank you, George, for your comments. It's a good reminder to everyone that I know passion is important for what we bring to work and what we do, but it's so important to have civility, especially when we're speaking to a large audience, and respect for fellow employees. So I appreciate, George, you making those comments.
And George, I also wanted to say that I appreciate your comments.
All right, do we have any other speakers?
We have no other speakers for public comment.
Okay, then we will next go to receiving a presentation on the ethics policy of the East Bay Mud Board of Directors and updates to the Brown Act and ethics laws.
Yeah.
All right. Well, good afternoon, President Linney and Board of Directors. At long last, we come to our annual Brown Acts and Ethics Update. We are here today under Board Resolution number 33414, which was passed in 2004, and that was the resolution that adopted Ethics Policy 604 and mandates that it shall be annually reviewed with the Board of Directors together with a review of the Ralph and Brown Act. And so today we are going to be reviewing the ethics policy, and then I'm going to be providing you with an update on legal developments in 2021 covering the Brown Act, conflicts of interest under the Political Reform Act, and conflicts of interest under Government Code 1090.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay. So the policy 604, the policy promotes awareness of ethics, integrity, and fidelity as critical elements of the board members' conduct in the achievement of the board's mission. And within the policy itself, there are references to the various laws that are incorporated into the policy, including the Political Reform Act, Government Code Section 1090, the Election Code, the California Constitution, and the MUD Act, just to name a few. And the policy really should be the first place to look to for questions regarding board member governance and ethics. So the policy covers many, many ethical duties, including promoting safeguarding proper use of district property and resources, safeguarding confidential information, avoiding holding incompatible offices. Today, we're going to be focusing on laws related to the promotion of fair and open government, avoiding conflicts of interest, and adhering to political contribution laws. There we go. All right. So we're going to start with the Ralph M. Brown Act. And the purpose of the Brown Act is stated right up front. It is the intent of the law that the actions of the members of government bodies be taken openly and that their deliberations be conducted openly, based on the fact that the people insist on remaining informed so that they may retain control over the instruments they have created. And so a central tenet of the Brown Act, of course, is open access to government meetings. And the Brown Act states itself that a member of the public shall not be required as a condition to attendance at a meeting to fulfill any condition precedent to his or her attendance. So while we do ask people to sign in or provide their names, that's really for our information only. And we, of course, do not refuse to allow anyone to attend a meeting based upon refusal to provide information, for instance. Now, as you can imagine, it has been difficult during the pandemic to balance the Brown Act's requirement for open government and meeting attendance with the necessity of protecting the health and safety of the public and board members and district staff during the pandemic. And so, of course, we come to the first and major Brown Act revision of the year, and one which you are all readily familiar with, and that's Assembly Bill 361, under which we are holding these virtual meetings. AB 361 amended the Brown Act to allow governing bodies to hold meetings solely via teleconference, so long as a state of emergency under the California Emergency Services Act has been declared and in effect, and either state or local officials have imposed or recommended measures to promote social distancing, or the governing body has determined that as a result of the emergency, meeting in person would present imminent risk to the health and safety of meeting attendees. This board first adopted a resolution authorizing virtual meetings under the amended Brown Act at the September 28th, 2021 board meeting. Now, following that, the AB 361 requires the board to meet not later than every 30 days to make the following findings by majority vote. A, the legislative body has reconsidered the circumstances of this state of emergency, meaning that you've listened to the facts and you've considered whether or not it is still necessary to continue virtual meetings. And B, any of the following circumstances exist. The state of emergency continues to directly impact the ability of the members to meet safely in person, or state or local officials continue to impose or recommend measures to promote social distancing. So next I want to talk to you about an Attorney General opinion that came out in 2021 that looked at the Brown Act and its open meeting requirements in relation to the governing bodies of two separate governing agencies. And it's really relevant to the district because it looked at governing bodies and then the members of those governing bodies' attendance at JPAs as the representatives of those government bodies. So basically, under the opinion letter, 5 local agencies created the Indian Wells JPA, and each local agency had a representation sitting on the JPA. And the JPA managed a groundwater sustainability plan. And important for the outcome of this opinion was the JPA had the authority to actually impose penalties on groundwater users for violation of the plan. Now, JPA committee members would go back to their own governing bodies and they'd take public comment at open meetings at those governing bodies on matters pending before the JPA. And then those representatives were advised with respect to those pending matters. So the Attorney General was asked a couple of questions. And the first one was, does the Brown Act prohibit JPA appointees from discussing a matter pending before the JPA with their respective member agencies at those agencies' separately held open meetings? And the Attorney General concluded no, because those discussions don't involve collective deliberation by a quorum of any governing body outside of its respective governing meeting. The Attorney General focused on the fact that really the Brown Act doesn't regulate individual conduct. So it was not a violation of the Brown Act. Now, an interesting question was, and remember that the JPA could impose discipline and sanctions for violating the groundwater sustainability plan. And so the question is it a violation of procedural due process if JPA members went back to their agencies and discussed at an open meeting how to decide an adjudicatory matter pending before the JPA? And you know, a central tenet of due process is that in an adjudicated proceeding, the constitutional guarantee of due process requires a fair tribunal before a neutral, unbiased decision maker. And in looking at this scenario, the Attorney General concluded that, well, maybe, essentially, because and that it's quite possible that due process could be violated. And that was really based on 2 findings. First, it was possible that at the individual governing body meetings, the governing body would discuss evidence with the member of the JPA that was outside of the record before the JPA. And so the person who was going to be disciplined by the JPA itself would not be able to confront that evidence because it was discussed at a different meeting. And then the second basis for the Attorney General's opinion was that the JPA member in taking direction from the fellow members of their governing body, may develop biases that the member would then take back to the JPA in making decision in relation to the penalties. So in short, it could very well be a due process violation. This is relevant to the district and can be relevant to the district because, as you know, various board members do sit on JPAs, and so that's all I had on the Brown Act and updates to the Brown Act. Next, I want to discuss the Political Reform Act. Now, the Political Reform Act governs conflicts of interest in decisions affecting a financial interest. And it also dictates public disclosure of personal financial information. It governs political campaign contributions, spending and advertising, and lobbyist financial disclosures and practices. The Political Reform Act prohibits a board member from directly or indirectly participating in a governmental decision in which the member has a financial interest. And as I'm sure you've heard in years past, there are 5 types of financial interests. Investments of $2,000 or more in a business entity, real property valued at $2,000 or more, which we will shortly discuss, and various other sources of income valued at $500 or more. Now, as you know, we're required to annually report various financial interests in our Form 700s, and sometimes it can be difficult to determine what constitutes a financial interest under the Political Reform Act. And an example of that, of a financial interest, is a behested payment. A behested payment is essentially charitable fundraising. It's payment made at the behest of a candidate or elected officer for legislative, governmental, or charitable purposes. And I think the most common scenario is charitable fundraising. They're not considered gifts or political contributions under the Political Reform Act, but they must be reported to the Fair Political Practices Commission within 30 days following the date on which payments equal or exceed $5,000 in the aggregate from the same source in the same calendar year in which they are made. So there was a perceived need in the legislature for more transparency in related to the reporting of behested payments, and so the FPPC promulgated a few new regulations that I just wanted to bring to your attention. One of them requires a description of the relationship between recipient nonprofits and the elected officer or immediate family member in the disclosure, so that you just need to provide more information in relation to a behested payment in terms of your relation to the recipient of the behested payment. There's provisions providing a good faith estimate when the exact amount of the payment hasn't been determined within the 30 days for reporting requirement. And then an interesting one is the reporting requirement is triggered when an elected official acts in concert with a charitable organization and is featured in a charitable fundraising solicitation. And all resulting funds must be reported. And featured, for the purposes of these regulations, means your name could appear on a letterhead. And if the majority members of the board of the nonprofit are all elected officials, then basically all income raised by that charity needs to be reported. So, as I mentioned, the Political Reform Act also governs campaign finance, and the law has for a long time prohibited contributions and expenditures and solicitation or receipt of contributions or expenditures from foreign governments and foreign principals in connection with state or local ballot measures. So AB 319 extended that prohibition to state and local candidate elections. And I raise that because when we think of the term foreign principal, we think, well, a principal is someone important and kind of a no-brainer that you're not going to be accepting campaign contributions from someone like Vladimir Putin. But it's defined really as any person outside the United States as the person, unless the person's a citizen of the United States or a lawfully admitted permanent resident. So if you have friends or family living abroad, then you could be impacted by this law. Director Mellon.
Could you go back to the previous slide? it caught my attention because I'm on a board of a nonprofit. I don't get paid, and I don't acknowledge that I'm on the East Bay Mud board. Do I have some sort of obligation here?
Well, I'd have to look at the entire board of the nonprofit to be able to answer that question. But it really depends on the solicitation and how you feature in that solicitation. So if your name is prominently used, then possibly. So,
Well, we don't raise any money. We don't solicit any money. And because we started out with what's the word I want to use? An endowment from the onset. And so we're, for lack of a better way of explaining it, we set ourselves up on the basis of spending ourselves into oblivion because of how we started. And none of the other members of the board are elected officials anywhere.
So it sounds like there would not be a conflict because if we go back to a behested payment, it's a payment made at the behest of the elected officer. So it would really be a payment that you solicit to your organization. And given that it's already pre-funded, it sounds like there would not be any request for funding coming from you.
Now we just happen to have an extraordinary money manager. That's all.
Well,
okay, thank you. I apologize for the interruption, but you sure caught my attention quick.
Director Young.
You're on mute.
God, that darn mute button. I'm on a board, responsibility of the board, and unlike Frank's case, I'm not functioning with an endowment, far from it, actually. And I feel like I've asked this question before, but under these new rules, part of the job of being a board member is fundraising. So I regularly, send out requests to friends and colleagues and make phone calls, etc., to, ask them to contribute to the organization. I'm not doing that again in my role of a elected official. It's in my role as a board member of, Clean Water Action or whatever board I'm on.
Yes. And again, I would want to look at this in more detail. And I'll just say, put this disclaimer for any questions asked today, I'll probably want to look at it in more detail. But if you are raising $5,000 from any single source,
No.
then that may be reportable. If
I haven't been
solicitation-
that successful at this point. So.
Right. So if your solicitations are less than 5,000 from the same source, then that would not be considered a behested payment. Or I'm sorry, it would not be considered a reportable behested payment.
And let me ask, it says charitable. On the previous slide, it said a charitable organization. How is that defined?
I believe it's defined as a nonprofit 501c3. I'd have to go back and look at the regulations.
Yeah, nonprofits also include 501c4s and also PACs.
501c5s.
Yeah, I don't know if it
PACs
actually cites the IRS code. So again, I would want to look at that in more detail. And again, it doesn't just cover charitable organizations, but also raising funds perhaps for another candidate. Or legislative, government, or charitable purposes.
So it's purposes, it says purposes, not organizations.
Correct.
It's an interesting distinction, maybe.
Okay. I'll move on. So next, under the Political Reform Act, I wanted to discuss an example of when a property interest, and specifically home ownership, can impact or trigger the considerations of the Political Reform Act. And these are two FPPC advice letters related to the City of Galt's Carilion Boulevard Corridor Plan. So the City of Galt is a population of about 25,000 folks outside of Sacramento, or on the edge of Sacramento. And they were considering adopting a plan to improve the Carilion Boulevard corridor to reduce traffic, promote alternative transportation and bike lanes, so it's going to be a rather major project resulting in improved traffic and increased public transportation on this street. The CEQA documents noted that the project would reduce overall passenger vehicle use and would thus likely reduce traffic noise. Now, in conjunction with the plan, of course, the City Council would have to approve the plan itself, and then there would probably be future considerations regarding contracts for construction, and each of those would trigger a Political Reform Act consideration. So the city wrote to the FPPC, and it asked 3 questions. May Councilmember Lozano, who owns a house between 500 and 1,000 feet from the project site, meaning the corridor, take part in decisions related to the corridor plan? And then the other 2 questions related to Councilmember Papineau and Vice Mayor Santu, who owned residential property less than 500 feet from the project site, and could they take place in any decisions related to the corridor plan? And as it turns out, the answer to the question and really the burden of proof depends on how far you live from the proposed project. So the basic rule is public official has a financial interest in a decision if it is reasonably foreseeable that the decision will have a material financial effect distinguishable from its effect on the public generally, on the official, a member of his or her immediate family, or on certain specified economic interests, including any real property in which the public official has a direct or indirect interest worth $2,000 or more. Now, under the Political Reform Act, it is considered, a decision is considered to have a reasonably foreseeable effect if for property less than 500 feet from the, if the project is less than 500 feet from the official's parcel, unless the official can show by clear and convincing evidence that the decision will not have a measurable impact on the parcel. Or if the project, if the official's property is located more than 5,000 feet but less than 1,000 feet, then the burden is different. And in that case, it is considered a material effect if the decision would change the parcel's development potential, income producing potential, highest and best use, character, and market value. So as to Councilmember Lozano, who was located I think he was located approximately 750 feet away from Carilion Boulevard, the FPPC concluded that the corridor plan would not affect developmental potential or its highest or best use, its market value, or its income producing potential of the property. The FPPC reasoned that the project is far enough away that it's not going to substantially alter traffic levels, intensity of use, parking, view, privacy, noise levels in the vicinity of Councilmember Lozano's property. And what's interesting is the FPPC looked at the findings in the CEQA documents, the initial study mitigated negative declaration. The FPPC's conclusions was that because the decision would not have a reasonably foreseeable material financial effect on his property, he could take part in the decisions pertaining to the corridor plan. Now, Councilmember Papineau and Vice Mayor Santu were subject to a heightened standard. They had the burden of proving by clear and convincing evidence that there would be no material impact on their properties. And so for these properties, the FPPC looked at the CEQA documents again, and it noted a reduction in traffic noise, congestion, and traffic idling, and improved safety and increased bicycle access. And it noted that those could affect market values of nearby properties. And again, shifting the burden, the FPPC concluded there's no clear and convincing evidence that the corridor plan would not have a measurable effect on those properties. And so Councilmember Papineau and Vice Mayor Santu had disqualifying interests and must recuse themselves from decisions pertaining to the project. It did not end there yet, however. Vice Mayor Santu really wanted to participate in decisions related to the project, and so he sent a second letter to the FPPC and asked if the public generally exception under the Political Reform Act would allow him to participate. And under the public generally exception, a governmental decision's financial effect on a public official's financial interest is indistinguishable from its effect on the public generally if the official can establish that a significant segment of the public is affected and the effect on his or her financial interest is not unique compared to the effect on that significant segment of the public. And the FPPC even defines a significant segment of the public as at least 15% of residential real property within the official's jurisdiction would be impacted equally. So the FPPC analyzed the vice mayor's property and noted that, you know, Galt is kind of a long, narrow town, and 15% of the city's residential property was located less than, at most, 750 feet from Carillion Boulevard, so that threshold was met. And then in looking specifically at the vice mayor's property, the FPPC determined that it's located over 300 feet from the project, but it involved so many turns and twists to get there that there was really nothing unique about that property in comparison to all the other residents that lived there. And so the FPC concluded that considering the size and scope of the project, its less than significant impacts under CEQA and all of the twists and turns to get to Vice Mayor's house, there'd be no distinguishable difference on the impacts such that he could participate in decisions. And Director Young, I see you have your hand up.
And you mute on.
No, that was earlier.
Oh,
I just
okay.
didn't lower it from before.
All right. So the last thing I want to look at is Government Code Section 1090. Section 1090 is different from the Political Reform Act in that it really focuses on making a contract. And it prohibits a public official or employee from making a contract in which the official or employee has a financial interest. Participating in making a contract is defined very broadly as any act involving preliminary discussions, negotiations, compromising, reasoning, planning, drawing plans, and specifications and solicitations for bids. If a public official has a disqualifying financial interest, the entire governing body can't approve the contract, even if the interested member of the governing body recuses themselves. So the last advice letter I want to look at is the Byrd advice letter regarding the Modesto Irrigation District. And so MID's board member Larry Byrd voted to adopt a groundwater replenishment program to protect the groundwater basin. And under the GRP, farms that were outside of Modesto Irrigation's boundaries, but within its sphere of influence, that were at least 10 acres in size, could apply to receive irrigation water from the irrigation district at $60 an acre foot in lieu of groundwater pumping. Now, board member Byrd was a partner in almond grower A.B. LaGrange. So the question was, does Section 1090 prohibit board member Byrd from taking part in and Modesto Irrigation District from entering into any contract with A.B. LaGrange to participate in a groundwater replenishment program? Now, keeping in mind that board member Byrd voted to adopt the program, the FPPC concluded that Section 1090 would prohibit MID from entering into any contract with A.B. LaGrange because simply voting to adopt the program was considered participating in making contract in the preliminary stages. And that was all I had today. I tried to make it quick and thorough, and I think I achieved one or the other. But every year we end with this slide. And the point we want to drive home is that this stuff is hard. Ethics laws, they're many, they're multi-layered, they're complex. If you ever have questions, feel free to hop on the phone, either with me or the FPPC, and we will find you the answer. And Director Mellon.
So I emailed to you the link to the foundation that I'm involved with. And if you have questions from me on that, please let me know, because it does a lot of very important work for seniors. And I didn't realize that there wasn't, this thing was sitting out there. So just take a look at it and call me if you have particular questions.
I will certainly do so. Are there any other questions? Seeing none, that's all I have for today.
All right, thank you, Derek.
Thank you very much.
We will now convene to discuss closed session agenda item. We're scheduled to return for our regular meeting at 1:15.
President Lenny, really quickly, we received written comments, and I advised the people who submitted the comments that they will be read at the 11:30 meeting. So I just wanted to briefly reference the comments from John Roberts in support of the Local 2019 wage proposal. And John Roberts is a member of Local 2019. Next comment is from Ishtar Knox, supports the Local 2019 wage proposal. Next comment is from Emily Songster, in support of 2019's equity proposals, especially for the graphic designers, and the board also received a copy of the equity adjustment proposal for graphic designers. Next comment from Martha Barrera, supports Local 2019's wage proposal, especially the higher CPI component for wages in years 3 and 4. And last comment from Robert Jungenberg, in support of Local 2019's wage proposal. And I have one more comment from Eric West, GIS engineer, in support of Local 2019 wage proposals. And those comments will be a part of the meeting record. That concludes public comment.
And President Linney, I would suggest that we plan to return at 1:30.
1:30. Okay, so be it. All right, so we are now, this portion of the meeting is going to be over. All right, welcome everyone to our Tuesday, February 8th, 2022 regular business meeting of the East Bay MUD Board of Directors. In accordance with Government Code 54953E, this meeting will be conducted by webinar teleconference only. A physical location will not be provided for this meeting. The board met in workshop session this morning to receive updates on the district's customer assistance program. And DERWA met yesterday on February 7th. Representatives will report out under item 13. All directors, including myself, are participating remotely. A roll call, please, Madam Secretary.
Director Coleman.
Present.
Director Katz.
Present.
Director McIntosh.
Here.
Director Mellon.
Present.
Director Patterson will be joining us. Director Young.
Yes.
And President Lenny.
Yes. So please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America
and to the
republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. There will be there are no announcements required from closed session. We're now on to the public comment. This is where anyone from the public who wishes to speak on agenda or non-agenda items can speak by raising your hand or using the raise your hand feature in Zoom. Comments on non-agenda items will be heard at the beginning of the meeting. Comments on agenda items will be heard when that item is up for consideration. When prompted, please state your name, affiliation if applicable, and topic. Please refrain from providing personal information such as addresses or phone numbers during public comment. If we need this information, we will have you contact staff. The secretary will call each speaker in the order received, and each speaker is allocated 3 minutes to speak. However, I have the discretion to amend this time based on the number of speakers. The secretary will track your time and inform each speaker when the allotted time has concluded. We have mentioned before, we have some speakers, so we're ready to get started.
All right, so, okay. I think that's on the panelist side. If you want to mute your mics on the panelist side for now. So the first speaker under public comment is Nick Lawrence. And Nick, you should be able to unmute your mic, and your 3 minutes will start now.
Is this mic on?
Yes.
Thank you, Risha. Greetings, East Bay MUD employees, directors, General Manager Chan, posse members, fire official, and the many members of the public tuning in today. Your neighbor, Nick Lawrence here, with episode 12 of A Dangerous Condition of Public Property, the still out of service fire hydrant, number H14100 on Tappan Terrace in Orinda, threatening the safety of homes and families in Orinda. Today's episode is called Busted. You there, in the lime safety vest, did East Bay MUD tell you they got busted?
Like a ticket?
Yes, Orinda Fire Department violation number 21-3169-001, 2 counts, was served on East Bay MUD for violations of the California Fire Code sections 5071 and 507.3 for its failure to provide the required fire flow, water, in other words, to Tappan Terrace's sole fire hydrant H14100.
Wow, that's pretty serious.
You bet. And each day East Bay MUD fails to correct the violations are considered separate violations. So it's been about 75 violations and counting.
Didn't PG&E get violations too?
Yes, and convicted felons they are for keeping bad records and ignoring public safety. East Bay MUD isn't quite there yet, but with yet 30 additional out-of-service fire hydrants, maybe the one in your neighborhood, the clock is ticking louder.
What does this all mean?
Well, when it gets added up, East Bay MUD is going to pay big time for creating and allowing to continue for 23 months the dangerous condition of public property on Tappan Terrace.
Ouch, but didn't they promise to fix it?
Well, yes, East Bay MUD General Manager's very own brother, Carlton Chan, recognized the extreme community danger that existed, promised the dangerous condition would be corrected promptly 10 months ago with the puny 2-inch rubber hose replaced with an 8-inch supply line.
But could anyone lose their job over this?
Well, apparently political juju happened behind closed doors, and the gamblers at East Bay MUD have so far thwarted Carlton Chan's promise and spread lies about it to others. We'll have more about this in an upcoming episode.
Can anyone go to jail?
Well, too soon to say yet whose jobs and bonuses are at risk, but stay tuned. When the posse investigators find out, we will let you know. We pause now for a word from our sponsor, Miss Orin, the resident.
Please, East Bay MUD, fix the dangerous condition of property before my house burns down.
Okay, tune in again, everyone, next meeting for episode 13 as the cover-up is further revealed. And posse members, keep those great tips coming to East Bay MUD at NICKLAWRENCE.com. That's all for today, folks. We're on the official record and out of time. Back to you, Risha.
Next, we have Regina Myers. You should be able to unmute your mic. And your 3 minutes will start now.
Hi, my name is Regina Myers, and I'm a next door neighbor of East Bay MUD. You could probably see their lot right behind my shoulder. As your neighbor, I just wanted to let you know that we are scared to death of the Verizon tower that could be potentially going in across the street. But I'm here to speak about why I don't understand why why this is still potentially happening. The council, the city council, zoning board, all the neighbors that are directly impacted by the Verizon tower say no. And we got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of signatures of people who frequent the park that don't want this Verizon tower across the street from us. So as your neighbor, I'm begging you to rescind the lease for the Verizon tower. And if you can't rescind the lease, at least let them know that you will not be renewing the lease when it comes due. I mean, it's literally right across the street and in the most beautiful park in Berkeley. And to put it here, of all places, I see all these pictures behind all the board members and they're gorgeous. And none of them have a cell tower in the background. I mean, this is one of the most beautiful parks in Berkeley. And for East Bay Mud to commit to putting a cell tower in this park it seems shameful. And I mean, I really like having you guys as neighbors. You're great neighbors. It's, I couldn't ask for a better neighbor, but in this instance, I just really don't understand why you're going through with this. As I said, the city said no, the council, the zoning board said no. All the neighbors who are really directly impacted by this tower say no. And again, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people signed a petition saying don't put this there. And that's aside from the fact of how dangerous it is. It's on an earthquake fault. My husband and I took months. We took, I don't know how many years to be able to build our house on this lot because we're on an earthquake fault. And to put a tower and a diesel fuel gas thing there, to me, just makes no sense. Potentially, you could poison all the water that goes not only to this neighborhood, but the water flows downhill. So you could potentially be poisoning our water system. I just really don't understand why this is not a done deal and Verizon is not being told to go somewhere else to put their tower. Thank you.
Next, we have Alan Myers. You should be able to unmute your mic. And There we go. your 3 minutes will start now. Okay, so you can hear me okay? Yes. Hi. Yeah, my wife just spoke. As your neighbor and, as one of many, many neighbors that are directly affected, like my wife said, we can't understand why this tower is still potentially being built. We love being next to East Bay Mud, the reservoir, and the rate control station next door. It's great, but the tower is not wanted by anyone in the neighborhood, or very few in the neighborhood. So for East Bay Mud to be a good neighbor to us and maintain that relationship, this tower just doesn't make sense. It's not safe, or it's potentially unsafe because of the Hayward Fault being less than 250 feet away. And then, we're probably 250 feet from the potential tower, and we're concerned about the health effects of being that close to a tower. Regardless, I don't know. There's a lot of stuff that information is out there as far as RF radiation health effects. But the other thing is property values in this area. I understand East Bay Mud is going to be taking in some money from the lease, and Verizon is going to get, potentially better coverage, stuff like that. It's a money thing. Well, it's also a money thing for us. If you look at the potential loss in property values because of the tower, we're thinking economically as well. Everybody is their own business, and we're extremely concerned about the impact of this tower on our businesses, our lives. So, we're extremely unhappy about this potential tower, and we're urging and begging East Bay Mud to either rescind the lease or at least notify Verizon that the lease won't be renewed. From what we understand, it's you have to give them 3 years notice. But if you do that now, then
it's probably not economically viable for them to put the tower there. And there are many options available for Verizon, or at least a few, that don't involve a single tower. Might involve several towers, might cost more, but still, that's the economic equation. You know, everybody's got their economics to look at. Anyway, we're asking that East Bay MUD do the neighborly thing and don't let Verizon put a tower there. Thanks. I'll give back the rest of my time.
Thank you. Next, we have Christian Razner. You should be able to unmute your mic. And your 3 minutes will start now. Can you hear me? Yes. Oh, okay. Yes, I'm Christian Razner, and I am a property owner in the area of the proposed cell tower that Verizon will make. Verizon has a lease, as perhaps you know, with EBMUD, and that lease could simply lapse, and they should get notice that it happened. I want to mention something. EBMUD has an important history in paying attention to ecological and environmental concerns. Excuse me, Christian. Excuse me. Yeah. Can you turn down? I think you have a computer in the background. If you can turn that down because it's actually interfering with what you're saying. I don't have it. It's not me. I don't have that. Okay. I'm sorry. It has interfered with me too. Excuse me, Christian. Yes? Excuse me. Can you turn down? I think you have a computer in the back. So we have reverb, and there are no mics on in the boardroom or any of the directors. Okay. So okay. I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to restart your time. Are you there? Thank you very much.
Okay.
Am I coming through?
You're coming through fine.
Very good, thank you. I want to call attention to.
Are you there?
I would like to call attention to the history that EBMUD has of showing concern for environmental, ecological matters when brought to their attention. At my age, I'm over 80, and I recall very distinctly this becoming a turn for the better. And it was a great turn. And it's been an important history for a long time with EBMUD. In this Berryman Reservoir, that's where the project that Verizon has in mind, is where it's located. And the reservoir was rebuilt completely, and there was a great concern about the total surrounding, extensive consultation with the neighborhood and many people in it, and with the city. We would ask for this kind of interest to be continued. It's so important. There's issues of safety that are involved here. We're talking about diesel, equipment, and oil being stored right next to a reservoir located squarely on a fault line. It's a dangerous fault. And therefore, we think it's appropriate, really, simply to let that lease lapse. It's not in keeping with the entire tradition of EBMUD, and it's really threatening the water supply that's in the adjacent reservoir. It's a small and important reservoir for the area. That'll be all for my remarks today.
Thank you, Mr. Razner. I'm sorry we've had these technical issues here.
Yeah, I don't think it's over here.
I think your point was made. If not the first time, the second time. Appreciate it.
Next, we have Angelina DeAntonis. You should be able to unmute your mic. And your 3 minutes will start now.
Hi.
Okay.
I don't know what's going on.
Do you have two devices going?
I don't have a cell phone or anything.
Robin, just start muting. Just see. Hold on, we're gonna see if it's on our side. Give me one moment.
I don't have a cell phone or anything.
Yeah. We have all of the mics off here.
Let's see. I don't know what else I can try.
Okay, hold on one moment. That one is off. It's off. Mhm.
Can I switch to internal microphones? Oh my God. That's bad too.
Turn off the
I can
boardroom.
call in my phone, I guess.
Hold on one moment, please. You just turned off the boardroom? Okay. And so now we can't hear anything. Turn it back on. See what Angela. There's something in the boardroom. Okay. Can you try speaking again?
Hi.
Hi. Does anybody have on their mics? Give us one moment. You hit mute on that one? Okay, but that's the podium. Okay. Yeah, give us one moment.
Nothing's changed on our end.
I know. And everybody, where's everybody? Look, they're all running out. Everybody's mic is off, speakers are off, mics and speakers. Okay, my mic and my speaker is off. None of the board have their mic speakers on. Robin, your speakers are off? Okay. All right. I'm gonna try this. So can you unmute the boardroom? Let me just see something. Testing, 1, 2, 3. Can you unmute your mic one more time and we're gonna try public comment again?
Hi.
It's not in here.
Should I call in by phone?
Hold, can you try? Yeah, can you try calling in on your, because it's not, we have all extra mics and speakers off here. Can you try calling? I was on mute. Oh, can you try calling in on your cell phone?
Yeah, I have a landline. What's
Okay.
the number?
Give me one moment. The phone number is 669-900-6833. If you go to EBMUD. Right. If you go to EBMUD.com, the phone number and the web ID, the passcode and the telephone access code is on our board meetings page.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, and I'll look for you. Okay, let's try this again. Next, we have Joanne. Joanne, you should be able to unmute your mic.
Hi, everybody.
Hello, and your 3 minutes will start now.
First of all, I'd like to thank you all for your attention. The last time our group appeared in front of you, I think it was in 2019, asking for you to please not allow Verizon to build a cell tower that would loom over Cordonices Park and the Rose Garden, the historic jewels of the city of Berkeley. When Regina talked to you earlier today, she mentioned that we had gathered a lot of signatures. She and I went around the park with signatures, trying to gather the opinions of those enjoying the park, the kids that play ball there, the famous slide, and of course the historic Rose Garden. And not only did the citizenry of Berkeley say no through our city council and our zoning board, but the citizens that use this park also do not want a tower there. And we learned something really interesting, which is the majority of people who were using the park were not from Berkeley. They were from Albany, they were from Oakland, they were from around the Bay Area. So we know that this is also an attraction, an important attraction to the city of Berkeley. So there are options for Verizon. Verizon just wants to solve this with a large tower that's about 20 or 30 feet high, with the option of going even higher and leasing out some of their space higher to other participants in the telecommunications industry. So it's not just entirely about service, it's also a profit center for Verizon. And I know for East Bay MUD too. The city of Sonoma and also some areas of Contra Costa have successfully fought against the single tower idea. One of the ideas we like a lot in Berkeley is kind of like an independent lamp stanchion, street lights, which contain significant power to provide not only light, but also cell service within the hills. So we asked the East Bay MUD board again to please not allow this tower to loom over the jewels of the city of Berkeley, and also just to let the permit that they have expire, which I think is going to happen quite soon if they don't build. We think there are other solutions, and we're actively pursuing them on other fronts. So thank you so much for your attention. And I'm so sorry we're having technical difficulties. This is an important cause for not only people in Berkeley, but those who use the parks. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Okay, before I bring up the next speaker, if you are watching this meeting online and live streaming, please turn off that recording. That could be causing the feedback. And if you're in the room with somebody else listening to the meeting, and both of you are on the call, either on your phone or on a device, that could be causing feedback. So next we have Angelina DeAntonis. I'm gonna unmute. You should be able to unmute your mic.
Hi.
Are you watching on the web?
No, I don't think so. Let me see.
Are you participating? And you're calling from your landline now?
No?
Okay. I'm gonna come back to you. Lucinda Reinold, you should be able to unmute your mic.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, and your 3 minutes will start now.
Great. So my name is Lucinda Reinold, and like others, I'd also like to speak to you today about the lease that East Bay MUD gave to Verizon in 2018 to build this giant cell tower on the Berryman Reservoir in Berkeley. You should be aware by now that the Berkeley City Council, unlike East Bay MUD, recognized the danger to the community that this tower poses, and in 2020 voted unanimously to deny Verizon a permit. And I'd like to thank Andy Katz for his personal support during that meeting. So what happened was that Verizon then sued the city because of the decision. So the city, along with a group of neighbors, are now embroiled in an expensive lawsuit with Verizon, which we could very well lose. So because the East Bay MUD lease is the source of this problem, I'm here, along with others, to ask that you notify Verizon now that you intend to terminate the lease when the initial term is up, which I believe is next year. I understand East Bay MUD's commitment to equity and being a good community member in its service area. I mean, the customer service program is a good example of that. And that it may seem difficult to cancel this lease and not others in less affluent neighborhoods. But this tower is really unique, and it's unlike other towers because of its location and the resulting huge risk to public safety that it poses. First, it's going to be built, as you've heard, directly on the Hayward Fault, which has been identified as one of the most dangerous faults in the country. All forecasts agree that a major earthquake will happen here. And when it does, it can cause catastrophic damage to critical infrastructure, including water storage, and likely to the tower and this huge diesel storage tank that will be at its base. Secondly, the tower is in a designated high fire zone. So in either case, the tower could topple, the diesel storage tank could go up in flames and explode, endangering the reservoir and its contents. And the reservoir serves the entire area, not just the homes in the hills. So it's for these reasons that the tower presents an enormous danger to the whole community, not just to those of us who live nearby. It seems to me that allowing this tower, the Verizon project to go forward, is also contrary to EBMUD's pledge to the community and its stated commitment to environmental and public safety. EBMUD can really do better. Please do not put the public at risk and allow this tower to be built. So again, we respectfully ask that the board decide now to give Verizon notice that the lease will not be renewed next year. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, we have Carl Grimm. You should be able to unmute your mic.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Your 3 minutes start now.
Members of the board, General Manager Chan. I also live close to the Berryman Reservoir, and I wanted to start by expressing my appreciation for the care and attention that EBMUD puts into maintaining the trees and the conditions of the facility. I am here to support the community in asking that you consider terminating the Verizon land lease at the Berryman facility at the earliest possible time and give Verizon notice of your intent to do so. As Californians, the impact of water, fire, and earthquakes weighs on us seemingly more and more each year. I am deeply concerned a lease was granted to Verizon after they detailed their intent to build a facility that contains storage for diesel fuel close to the water tank, a 50-foot tall antenna 20 feet from the property line, all of which are situated virtually on the Hayward Fault. The 2019 Berkeley Hazard Mitigation Plan states that an earthquake hazard is likely and will have a catastrophic severity of event. The CA Earthquake Authority describes the fault as a tectonic time bomb, and the USGS puts a 75% chance of a 6.7 greater magnitude earthquake in the next 30 years. This is not a could happen scenario. This is a when does it happen scenario. Leasing the space to Verizon knowing their intent was to place a diesel fuel for a generator and equipment, including batteries and high voltage equipment, literally on the fault line is negligent and a foreseeable risk. In a breach scenario assessed by your very own environmental impact assessment, the entire generator and electric supply would be underwater. The permit filed with the city does not show any marine or submersible grade cabinets. This is a scenario anticipated as well by your very own lease, as you require Verizon to carry pollution liability insurance for such a disaster. The community, the zoning board, and city council have all made their safety concerns clear, resulting in a denial of the permit issuance and on its appeal. We think you will find the same. Please consider reviewing the current lease agreement and seriously consider the benefits to the community of giving notice of your intent to terminate at the earliest possible time. Allowing this facility to be built is not aligned with your mission of managing the natural resources with which you are entrusted and protecting the environment for future generations. We thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Next, we have Joey Smith. You should be able to unmute your mic, and your 3 minutes start now.
Thank you, Risha. Good afternoon, President Linney, Vice President Coleman, Board, General Manager Chan, and all staff, and everyone listening. Recently, there have been two people who were very instrumental in my career at EBMUD who have may transition from this plane on earth. Some people simply say died, but for me, their energy will always be with me. On December 29th, Sylvia Johnson, who needed to retire in 2004 for medical reasons, and David Richardson, who went from retiring from being a 444 president to being a board member for this organization and retiring in 2006. Each of them hold a very, very dear and special place in my heart. And I know we've mentioned it earlier that we will remember former director Richardson. Please include Sylvia Johnson. She was, I just have to say, very, very, very instrumental in me having a secure career here at East Bay MUD. So thank you for your consideration and have a good rest of your meeting.
Thank you. Next, we have Yvette Rivera. You should be able to unmute your mic. And your 3 minutes will start now.
Thank you, Risha. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I spoke this morning about my experience listening to Mark Carradine, Lisa McIntosh, and George Cleveland speak on January the 25th. I said that Mark detailed discrimination over his 30 years that he experienced at East Bay MUD, how Director McIntosh was outraged about a recent recruitment, and how George Cleveland expressed outrage about what he perceived as disparate treatment of a woman that has cancer and he felt was significantly punished and differently punished than a man who was allowed to retain his position at East Bay MUD. Since that, my comments this morning, Mr. Cleveland mentioned that the woman was likely getting her job back. And he did walk some of his comments back about general counsel staff and the district's actions. George Cleveland, if he wasn't there for this woman, she probably wouldn't have gotten her job back. But a lot of us know that the rage that George Cleveland expressed isn't something that happens for other people, mostly people of color and women at the district who are given a, retire or face severe disciplinary actions. I said this morning that it was really nice to see people express their outrage about employment decisions at the district. And I wondered where was everybody's outrage when Saji Pierce and Ariel Bland filed their complaints internally and then filed their complaints through a tort service and then filed their complaint in federal court. I also didn't get a chance to read from the tort complaint, but I'm going to save that for later. I just want to say I was really surprised that there was no outrage when Director Linney read Derek McIntosh's talking points about the Pierce lawsuit and how he inferred that it had no merit, despite Pamela Price, a renowned civil rights lawyer, taking on their case. I'm going to end this by just telling you one of the worst days for me in hearing East Bay MUD, or not hearing East Bay MUD respond to all of the allegations presented by Ariel Bland was the day that Craig Spencer was receiving a service award. And this was right after the district was served with a civil rights complaint against Craig Spencer, Laura Brunson, or Laura Acosta and East Bay MUD. So here we are. Craig Spencer is named in a big civil rights lawsuit.
Yvette,
East
just
Bay
to note that
MUD
your
is-
3-minute buzzer went off, and I
Okay,
just want to
well,
give you
I'm just
a
going to
note
wrap it
about
up
your
right
3
here.
minutes.
I'm just going to wrap it up right here. I just want to say that Saji Pierce didn't get the mentoring that Derek McDonald on that day tearfully talked about. I don't know where she was or what Craig was doing. Well, actually, from the tort complaint, apparently he was mentoring a brand new attorney with no
Your time is
litigation
up.
experience. I'm done, and I'll continue
right.
at the next board meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Oren Lehman. You should be able to unmute your mic. And
Unmuted.
your 3 minutes start now.
Okay, thanks for listening here. So I'm also calling in about the Verizon cell phone tower. A couple of points of clarification. I live across the street from the Berryman Reservoir. Lots of back and forth when it was upgraded to a steel tank. One of the reasons its current size is it was originally supposed to be 2.5 million gallons. It was reduced to 1.5 million gallons, round numbers, because it was going to be on top of the earthquake fault. They brought in seismologists and drills. So they made it smaller so it would not sit on the fault, it being the reservoir. That is exactly where this tower is going to be situated, right on the known fault, along with a tank of diesel. It just doesn't make a lot of sense. It's unsafe, and I don't think I need to say much more than that. Additionally, this is for the permits for a 50-foot tower with 20-foot antennas on top of that. So it's really a 70-foot tower. And I did float some balloons up on a 70-foot string and have photographs of that, and I'll probably email them to the board members when I find that photograph. It's a tall thing. It's just out of place, out of character, and a lot of effort was done to make that a beautiful space, which has already been mentioned and you folks may have already seen. That's all I want to say at this point and move on with our day, but I think you guys should rescind this contract, and it's just not a good look. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you. Next, we have Lindsay Edelman. Lindsay, you should be able to unmute your mic, and your 3 minutes start now.
Good afternoon, Board President Linney, board members, General Manager Chan, and everyone else in attendance today. I'm here to speak about the ongoing contract negotiations. I know we're getting close, but I still want to beat the drum saying I support Local 2019's wage proposal. I think it is more reflective of California cost of living, as well as benefits that staff have well earned. I support the locals' equity proposals, and I'm asking the board to give management's lead negotiator more authority so that the wage and equity proposals can be more aligned with the last best and final offer. So thank you again for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Lindsay.
And we're going to try Angelina DeAntonis one more time. If you're in the room with someone else who is listening into the meeting on a phone or a device, if everybody can mute all extra mics and speakers, that may help with the feedback. So you should be able to unmute your mic.
Hi there.
Hello, and your 3 minutes will start now.
Great, thank you. That sounds like it's working. I have my husband here with me too, and we only can raise one hand. I wonder if he could also speak. Is that possible after me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I'm also joining in with my neighbors to speak about the Verizon cell tower lease at Berryman Reservoir. I'm hoping you can think fresh and imagine the situation. A 50-foot cell tower with additional 20 feet with a narrow base reaching well above the other trees, the actual real trees, sitting on one of the most active fault lines right next to one of Berkeley's most visited parks. It soars above the natural tree line shaped into a fake pine tree. It's electrified with a serious load of electricity, and it has its own tank of diesel on standby, ready to power it in case of a power outage. So in 2019, the Berkeley Hazard Mitigation Plan stated that an earthquake would have a catastrophic severity of impact. Can you imagine the possibilities of catastrophic incidents that could ensue were we to have a serious earthquake? A toppled tower could ignite a fire. A fire could be fueled by diesel from the cell's tank of diesel. The reservoir tank itself is not impermeable to penetration by diesel as well. And what would happen if the diesel leaked into the reservoir or the watershed of the nearby Cordonisas Creek? Or if the fuel contaminated the groundwater and made its way to the bay? None of these scenarios would support a healthy bay area. It's impossible to know what might happen, but common sense would lead one to weigh the balance between the risk and the business needs of Verizon. I myself am definitely not comfortable with this level of risk, categorized by the USGS as a 75% chance of a 6.7 or greater earthquake in the next 25 years. So let's not take this risk. Please, let's support our water source and the surrounding community and our beautiful park. Please do not renew the Verizon lease, and I implore you to rescind it and notify Verizon of the intent to terminate. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Are we going to receive comment from the other speaker in the room with you?
Yes, hello.
Okay.
Thanks for letting me speak. So we are in this neighborhood, and I would like to.
Sorry, could you state your name?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, can you state your name, please?
Oh, yes, I'm Oliver Razner.
Okay.
Yeah, and I also spoke in front of the council when Berkeley voted against giving a permit to Verizon to build this tower, because common sense told the council members that this was a terrible idea, and their residents were not going to be happy, period. Okay, I believe that EBMUD regrets having quietly given this lease to Verizon. I know Andy Katz bravely took a personal stand in front of the council and spoke very clearly about the environmental risk, about the inappropriateness of that location. I know that Verizon is a large company. You may be afraid of them. They're your lessee. They're going to be your tenant. Maybe you're afraid of being sued by them. That's possible. You might have to defend the fact that you've been receiving money from them only to turn around and not renew this lease. I get that. But this has caused trauma among so many people here, people who are paying money if Berkeley folds to pursue and defend the interests of Berkeley, even without the city of Berkeley involved. It's only going to escalate. These people, we are not going away. These people are not going away. If we lose and then there's an appeal, it goes to the Ninth Circuit Court. That's in a year's time. This is going to go on for another year minimum. So you're looking at having received money for over 4 years by that time, $4,000 a month or whatever you're getting from them. This is only going to keep going. And please do not think that you will not be sued by the neighbors yourselves. You are responsible, okay? You quietly gave them the lease. Your PR personnel, the only person I've actually been able to speak to, said that this process is the community engagement that you are responsible for in your mission statements and in your prior negotiations with the city of Berkeley. Well, this is being circumvented, okay? And so the end result is lawsuits will continue, okay? I'm asking Andy Katz, what has he done in the last 2 years to bring to the other board members' attention this issue? And are you going to have you continued to give quiet leases that then you just launch onto the community and let them, like, do they ruffle their feathers, do they care or not, and call it the community, process, that is you're fulfilling all your duties to the communities you serve in by so doing. And I'm asking Andy Katz, whose interests of EBMUD he represents in our district, to take leadership on this. Talk to your colleagues, bring this up on the agenda, let Verizon know they don't have to force the city of Berkeley and its residents who care about all the residents in the city of Berkeley who frequent this park and area and are served by your water, okay, to take leadership here.
Mr.
We hope
Razner,
this-
your 3 minutes have concluded. If you can
Thank
wrap
you
up your
for your comment.
comments. That concludes public comment, President Lenny.
All right, thank you. And just a reminder to all those who came to speak about the cell tower, because that's not on the agenda today. It's not an item that we can comment on, but we did hear your comments, of course. So we will now move to the consent calendar, items 1 through 9. Are there any items to be pulled for today's discussion? Okay, can I get a motion? Yeah, your hand went up.
Yeah, just real quick, I just want to, I support it, but it's items 4.1, 4.2. It's on the expenditures for the reservoir, reservoir rented filter plant. We spent $292 million 2 weeks ago, and we're spending almost another 660,000. I just would ask that going forward, since we were submitting so much, that we keep a category, we be notified when additional expenses related to the rented filter plant are happening. But I support it, the initial items, but I just want to make sure that we're updated on such a huge expenditure of rented filter plant of 292 million. We're going to spend another 660,000, that we are aware of that. That's all.
And President Linney, just on that particular item, this is the last purchases that we're aware of for this project, but we will provide regular updates in the GM monthly report, and given the length of this project, we'll provide annual updates at the Planning Committee as well.
Frank?
I'm not asking to pull anything, just for purposes of clarification, where it's Bank of New York Mellon Trust. That is nobody I am related to in any way, shape, or form.
So you don't have to recuse yourself.
Worse than that, I don't have it.
But you wish you were.
I wish I had that money coming my way, but no, I don't have to recuse myself. But I
So
also
therefore, you're going to make a motion?
I would move acceptance of all consent calendar items.
Okay.
I'll second that. This is John.
By Director Mellon, seconded by Director Coleman. Any further comment? If not, we'll go on to roll call vote on the consent calendar.
Director Coleman,
Yes.
Director Katz,
Yes.
Director McIntosh,
Yes.
Director Mellon,
Yes.
Director Patterson,
Yes.
Director Young,
Yes.
President Lenny.
Yes. All right, our next item is item 10. In accordance with the Elections Code, Section 22001, we will conduct a public hearing to receive public comment on redistricting Proposal 1 as recommended by the Redistricting Ad Hoc Committee and accepted by the Board of Directors on January 11th, 2022. The hearing is now open, and we'll have a presentation.
Good afternoon. This public hearing, as President Lenny said, is to receive comment on redistricting proposal number 1. My name is Risha Cole, and today George McQuarrie and I will present information on the East Bay MUD's redistricting efforts. I'll review actions taken to date, and George will review the other information on the agenda. If you could move to the next slide, please. So we'll provide some background on redistricting efforts, and then George will go over ward population data, the ward population deviation percentages, the redistricting proposal 1, next steps, and if there are any board questions, and also receive comments from the public. In early 2000, you can go to the next slide. In early 2021, the U.S. Census Bureau announced that they will release data, census data in September. The late release meant a shorter time frame for redistricting efforts, and so the district started our efforts in May by establishing a redistricting ad hoc committee comprised of President Lenny, Vice President Coleman, and Director Young. On June 22nd and August 24th, the committee established the redistricting guidelines, and on September 14th, the board adopted the redistricting guidelines. On the 28th, the committee established the target population deviation, which George will discuss in upcoming slides. And on the 30th, the Census Bureau released the final census data, which staff used to confirm final service area population and the target ward population. We had a limited amount of time to complete our efforts. And on October 26th, the committee reviewed 3 redistricting proposals prepared by staff and recommended proposal 1, which we will review in the later slides for board consideration. On November 23rd, there was an additional committee meeting to allow additional public review and comment on the proposals. There was public outreach to the customers in or around the proposal 1 area in San Leandro and San Lorenzo. Information was posted to Nextdoor for the entire service area, and information was also sent out through our Water Smart application. On November 23rd, we had the additional meeting and we received comment from 1 person from the public. On January 11th, and on November 23rd, the committee reaffirmed its decision to recommend proposal 1 for board consideration. And on January 11th, the board accepted proposal 1 to present for public review and comment today. Just wanted to go over the public outreach for today's meeting. There were notices posted in the newspaper, in the Oakland Tribune, in the Contra Costa Times. There were ads placed in the Oakland Post and alternative language papers, Sing Tao, El Mundo, and Mo Magazine, a Vietnamese language magazine. We sent emails to over 1,100 local elected officials and organizations, and I checked the email before I came to the podium, and there were no comments received to date. So with that, I'll turn it over to George, and he will review the following information.
So EBMUD service area is where we deliver water to households and businesses. All residents of our service area under the MUD Act vote for representatives for their ward who must also be a resident. As we like to say, we drink our own water. So overall, since 2010, we've had 10% growth across the entire district. And as you can see, we've grown in 2010 from 1,337,782 to in 2020, 1,477,418. Every ward has added population since 2010's census. Some wards have grown more than others. Next slide, please. So if you take the 1,477,418, you divide it by our 7 districts, and that's how you get our 2020 target ward population of 211,060. Ideally, all 7 wards would have exactly that number. We have a little bit of variance instead. The board adopted target ward population. The board adopted allowable deviation is 3%. So that's plus or minus 6,332, or a low of 204,728, a high of 217,392. So when we did the math on the wards as they existed based on 2010, we found Ward 5 is the only ward that is above the population allowable, board adopted allowable deviation of 3%. And Ward 7, as you'll see on the next page, is the lowest. And unfortunately, they share a barrier. Next page, please, or border, pardon me. As you can see in the red row, Ward 5 has experienced the most population growth of all, and by the rightmost column, exceeds the board adopted allowable deviation of 3%. Ward 7 in blue has the least population of the 7 wards. Fortunately, these 2 wards are adjacent to each other, and there were multiple proposals made for the board's consideration on how to rebalance between these 2 wards so that all wards would be within the board adopted allowable deviation. In the end, the board accepted or recommended proposal 1. Let's run through it on the next page, please. So proposal 1 is to move an area of San Lorenzo that is east of Highway 880 from Ward 5 to Ward 7. This area is south of San Leandro Creek between 880 and the Southern Pacific Railroad line. The population is 4,637. Next page, please. So proposal 1 is the fish-shaped outline seen here in black. Currently, it is in Ward 5 on the left. The proposal is to move these 4,637 residents to Ward 7 on the right. So these residents will move from the left ward to the right ward, from purple to green, from Ward 5 to Ward 7. How does this rebalance things? Next page, please. As you can see here, Ward 5 in the rightmost row will now be well within the board adopted allowable deviation of 3%. So the redistricting committee chose proposal 1 because it is the easiest geographically for customers to determine their ward and director. Customers in San Lorenzo who may want to contact their director are able to say, do you reside on the bay side or hillside of 880? And that one question is so easy geographically to determine which ward they are in. Proposal 1 also provides additional constituents for Ward 7 and brings Ward 7 much closer to the 2020 target population of 211,060. Thank you. Back to you, Risha.
Next slide. So our next steps today is to receive public comment. Is there anybody on the line for public comment? Okay. We have one person for public comment. So Kelly A., if you can unmute your mic. Give us one moment.
Okay, well, thank you. So first of all, remember back when you were talking about all the great things that you're going to be doing for this redistricting. One of them was that as a best practice, you're going to adopt the Fair Maps Act. And one of the things that's buried deep in the Fair Maps Act, so deep that you and your consultants completely forgot about it, is that these redistricting hearings would be held at a set time. That's not agenda time, that's like clock time. And this meeting is being held at God knows how late, and certainly nobody would know that how late we are, and so the time is out the window. So that's step one of you're not following best practices. And then there's this idea of the board adopted. The board adopted deviation allowable deviation. You know, that's not really a best practice. That's like, actually this board is fanatical, or in the Freudian term, it seems to be, they used to say anal about the deviation. Most courts, as your consultants would tell you, would accept a 10% deviation. And, you know, and anywhere below 10, somewhere is a reasonable number. But by in this effort to achieve an incredible and neurotical degree of precision, you have taken the you also have you've taken common sense thrown out the window. Then in Ward 7 or somewhere, you have this great notion that you want to have it easy to understand which district you're in and why you're in it. Are you on the bay side or the hillside of some freeway? Well, what about this idea that when you have people in San Ramon and people in Castro Valley, they're not magically united because there's no service in between, and you somehow have zipped up this vast gulf of empty land, and these people are somehow joined politically or spiritually, or they have common community and common interest. They don't. That is a vast gulf between those Castro Valley Hills, Lake Chabot, whatever it is. And this isolated pocket of the San Ramon district is clearly against the principles of the Fair Maps Act and against any best practice. See, it's against all common sense. It is irrational and unreasonable, and it is not the right way. And it would be easily fixed, I guess, if you were to forget about your 3% board allowable and go by what the courts are telling you to do, and go by what the law is telling you to do, and forget about this 3% number and stop with the isolated enclaves of San Ramon that you have gerrymandered. This is a bad redistricting proposal. You should go back and fix it. Thank you.
May I ask Mr. Abreu a question, President Lenny?
Go ahead.
So, it's well established that every person can make public comment, and this is redistricting. So unless I've got it wrong, you've already acknowledged you don't have property in East Bay Mud. You don't represent any group.
Right.
And you don't, excuse me, I'm speaking, sir.
As a matter of fact, Mr. Linney, Director Linney, I do own property in East Bay Mud, and I've paid property. I used to pay the bills there myself, but I own the property. So no, Mr. Linney, Director Linney, you're wrong, and you shouldn't be, impugning my origins. You should be asking me about my knowledge of the Fair Maps Act and my knowledge
the next
of
question
court
I'm going to ask
rulings.
is, how does this redistricting affect you? Simple question. How does this?
You are breaking the law. It doesn't matter how it affects me. You're breaking. You're not following the best practices.
I'm done.
Excuse me just a second, Kelly. Director Mellon, I don't think that his residency has a bearing on his ability to give us comments on this.
I concur.
And I just don't think that that's,
But heretofore, the one thing we haven't heard is, how does this redistricting affect them? We just had speakers on a cell tower telling how that affected them. I'd like to know how this affects him. That's all.
All right. Well, all right. Are there any other comments?
Are there any other speakers for public comment? There are no other hands raised for public comment. President Linney, if I could just make a couple of comments.
Okay.
First, for the time for the hearing, the notice went out to the public that the public hearing time would be 1:15 or thereafter, because we normally don't have public hearings at the beginning of our meetings. So I wanted to note that. Second, the Fair Maps Act, the board said as practicably as possible that we would follow the Fair Maps Act, noting that the Fair Maps Act does not apply to special districts. So just wanted to note that for the record. Are there any other board comments or questions? Okay. So next steps, receive public comment today, and we will hold an additional public hearing on March 8th to consider adopting Proposal 1, to include it in the legal ward boundaries of the district. And then on April 12th, the board will consider approving the legal ward boundaries and the final ward map to submit to Alameda and Contra Costa counties by April 17th for the November 2022 elections. And we're on schedule to meet that April deadline. And we're already preparing the election-related documents for the board's consideration between March and June. So with that, that's the end of our presentation.
All right, any other board comments? I just wanted to mention the issue of deviation from a perfect numbered district. I do think is an important issue. Our one public speaker didn't think that was as important. Other issues, I respect his opinions on that, but I did want to say that I think that having districts where there are as close as possible an equal number of people there, not voters or citizens, but people in those districts is a very important criteria. In fact, the primary thrust of redistricting every 10 years with the census. And so I'm believing that that's an important thing. And I'm proud of the fact that we've been able to rebalance these districts. And would also just say, when I talk to our customers and they want to know who represents them, it's very nice to have some easily discernible boundaries that people don't have to go to some sort of census tract or voter tract or voter file or call the district to find out who the representative is. But it's clear that way. And I also think that's a principle that's important. You don't have representation if you don't know who your East Bay MUD director is. So I'm pretty clear why we recommended this map as it is. And I understand we're not voting on that today, but I wanted to make that point. Yes, Director Mellon.
I would concur with what you said, because this is my second time going through redistricting. And it's an essential concept to try and keep it as close as you can. And it was a lot tougher last time. Your ward didn't grow that much. It was the one that was, how are we going to balance there? And the fact that the amount of persons covered is so tight, I think that's amazing. You guys did a great job. And secondly, you're so right. When people ask me, well, what's your ward look like? I tell them it basically looks like a square or a rectangle. You go east from 880 till you hit 680. And then Oakland, Hayward, Pleasanton, Danville. It's nice to be able to tell people that easy and not worry that somebody's being left out in the cold.
Great.
Thank you, Doug.
All right, thank you. Can I have a motion to close the hearing?
I would so move, Doug.
All right. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Let's have a roll call vote to close the hearing.
Director Coleman,
Yes.
Director Katz,
Yes.
Director McIntosh,
Yes.
Director Mellon,
Yes.
Director Patterson,
Yes.
Director Young,
Yes.
President Lenny.
Yes. We'll now move to determination and discussion.
Thank you, President Linney. So before you is a resolution to continue to hold virtual board meetings under AB 361. I will say the good news is that the surge in COVID cases that we saw last month is declining rapidly, which is similar to what we're seeing in the Bay Area in general and the state. However, the state is still under a declared state of emergency and social distancing is still recommended. Before you for your consideration is a resolution to continue the virtual meetings for another 30 days in case conditions change. I will say if the downward trend continues, the plan is to start the transition of bringing employees back to the office beginning February 28th. And the plan would be to start in-person board meetings on March 8th or sooner if the board chooses. And as I've done in the past, if conditions change, I will let the board know about those changes. So with that, the resolution is up for your consideration. Director Mellon?
So move.
Before we go rolling along, I want to be sure I understand. Clifford, you're saying that employees would be back on February 28th, but the board would not be back until March 8th?
It's because the next board meeting is on the 22nd. And the employees will come back on starting the 28th. And again, this is a transition. This is not the final. This is our transition. And so the next board meeting after February 28th is on March 8th.
I feel a degree of discomfort of asking employees to come back before we're willing to come back. I'd feel more comfortable coming back on February 22nd. Is that possible?
If the board so chooses, we could accommodate that.
Well, that's Frank, but not Lisa.
Well, I have a quick question, Clifford. This is John. The governor is changing next week on the 15th or 16th. I believe it's no longer I don't know what his technical term is. It's no longer a crisis, I guess. And you don't have to even show vaccination cards to go into restaurants and things of that nature. So how does that play into the decision when we reconvene?
Well, the criteria for AB 361 is based on a couple of criteria. First, there still has to remain a declared state of emergency. And then the second is that social distancing either has to be recommended or promoted, or we determine that there's a risk for having an imminent risk of having board meetings to the safety of the employees or the people who will be attending the meeting, the board members. I would say that after February 28th, if all things point in the direction that they're pointing, it would be hard to make that case. As far as the governor, I mean, there are a lot of things that are changing. He's talking about different plans. We haven't seen it. He's talked about, he's going to release an endemic plan. We haven't seen anything like that yet. So we will, of course, follow whatever the governor puts out to make sure that we're consistent. But what we know right now, there won't be any issues with bringing employees back on the 28th. And for the board to meet in March or earlier, if the board so chooses.
We have one public comment. Okay.
Go ahead.
George Cleveland, you should be able to unmute your mic, and your 3 minutes start now.
Thank you, Risha. Good afternoon, President Linney, rest of the board of directors, General Manager Chan, anyone else paying attention, listening in on this meeting. I'm not sure the board knows, we still haven't set I'm sure it's coming up soon, but we still have a meet and confer over the impacts of potentially coming back on February the 28th. So that's still to be scheduled. So that's part of it. The other part is my opinion is that no one should be back to work until COVID is declared an endemic, and not in the state, but by the federal government, because as it still is classified as a pandemic, I don't think anybody should be in the office until it's declared endemic instead. Basically, we're like the flu, where we have it and we live with it. And that's all I want to say. So thank you very much.
So just to respond to George, I mean, I'll have to talk to Winnie, our HR director. I'm not aware of a meet and confer related to the February 28th. I know that there's some other meet and confers related to COVID. So I'll check on that one, but I'm not aware of anything, but I will look into that.
Well, Clifford, if I may, it's because it was pushed back. We were supposed to come back, I think, sometime in January, and then it was pushed back because of Omicron. So we were going to meet earlier, but the surge pushed everything back, and that's why the date was changed to the end of February. We still have to meet over it. So.
Yeah, and I appreciate your feedback, George, and I just got a note from Winnie. She's not aware either, but she'll check into it.
Thank you.
That said, the resolution before you is to extend it for another 30 days.
I think Lisa made the motion. I'll second it.
Can I ask a question? So making the motion, I mean, we've been doing this on the retirement board, and we have to call special meetings because our meetings don't happen every month. But the making this motion doesn't preclude our return earlier, correct?
That's correct.
So is there, I don't know, how do we approach something that's the 28th is when we're all back, and that, you know, the 22nd is an option for those of us that feel comfortable to return.
Yeah, so the resolution is just really just in case the situation changes, because we don't want to have a special board meeting just to extend it. So that just gives us the
Right.
more flexibility. You know, if some board members want to come back to the board meeting on the 22nd of February, they certainly can. But hopefully by March 8th, you know, the entire board, if they're comfortable, will return in person.
Okay.
Is there still a motion needed, or do we have the motion?
We need a vote.
Seconded.
Did I get a second?
I second.
All right. Director Coleman seconded. Any other further discussion? All right, let's have a roll call vote, please.
Director Coleman,
Yes.
Director Katz,
Yes.
Director McIntosh,
Yeah.
Director Mellon,
I'm going to say yes, with the appreciation of what Director Young got as additional information. So I'm looking to be back on the 22nd, but I understand the need for this as a placeholder. So yes.
Director Patterson,
That's a lot of. Are we
do
going to
my
include
best,
that in the
Doug.
motion somewhere, Frank? Yeah, thank you. I'm sorry. Director Patterson, yes.
Yes.
Go ahead, Risha.
okay.
That's okay.
Director Young,
Yes.
President Lenny.
Yes, carries unanimously.
Thank you very much. Moving on to the general manager's report, I have a few items for you today. First is a topic that we touched on early last year, but put on hold because of COVID. We want to share with you and get your feedback on setting up an East Bay Mud Community Water Academy. The academy is part of our outreach efforts to build community awareness of the work that we do. This year's academy, the plan is for it to be a pilot to allow us to work through the details and adjust the program. After the pilot, the plan is to hold the academy every other year, beginning next year in 2023. And we have Mona Favorite-Hill, our Senior Community Affairs Representative, and Catherine Horn, our Community Affairs Representative, to provide the update.
Good afternoon, President Lenny and members of the board. Thank you for allowing us to talk about this new outreach project. We're very excited to add another dimension to the district's education program. Before we go over what the program entails, I'd like to say a little bit about the purpose of the pilot and the program. In our work, every day we interact with residents, and everything from they just want to know why we're still tearing up their street and when it will be over, to elected officials who want to know what's going to happen when we run out of snow melt. So we've learned from these daily interactions and from the presentations that the board members have done over the past 2 years that while people may understand the individual projects, they don't have a clear knowledge of what we do and why we need to do it. Each time we talk to elected officials, our city administrators, our community leaders, and our more vocal residents, we have to try to explain how our system works, why we can't give away free water, why those fees are on their bills. And so we have to recreate this conversation each time. So the Community Water Academy is designed to take people through our system, give them a clear understanding of how we operate, and not just how we operate, but what governs us, what guides us, and what shapes our future water planning. So with this program, we hope to create water ambassadors who can help us get our messages out into the community, build partnerships with city and county officials, prepare our alternate board members in case they have to step in an emergency, and develop a water educated base from which we can draw potential board members. Not that any of you are ever going to leave. So next slide. So our goals for the pilot is to increase public understanding of East Bay Mud's water and wastewater system, educational opportunities for local officials, agency staff, and key community leaders, and to build support for long-term goals, including infrastructure investment, environmental protection, and our innovation objectives. Now I'm going to turn it over to Catherine Horn to give more details on how the pilot will work. Catherine?
Thanks, Mona. Next slide, please. So good afternoon, President Linney, members of the board, and General Manager Chan. Thank you for having us today. As Mona mentioned, we're pretty excited to bring forth this project to you. So this Community Water Academy would begin this year, 2022, as a pilot program, which would be used to inform an expanded future program. After conducting some research into what other water and sanitation agencies do for their similar community programs, we are proposing a 5-week pilot that would start this summer with weekly sessions, 1 evening a week for 5 weeks. Keeping in mind that this is a pilot program and we may still be contending with COVID, hopefully not, we're suggesting to start small with a group of about 15 participants or about 2 people per ward to ensure a good geographic representation. We'll be soliciting input from the board as we select participants, and we can provide the board with some guidelines based on our research from what other agencies are doing in their selection process. Some suggested groups for the pilot may include board alternates or city officials. Each session will last about 2 hours and would be held in person at various locations throughout our service area. We are trying to think of places that could be held outside so that we can still be COVID safe. For instance, one tour, we might do a tour of the wastewater treatment plant. We could hold one session at our Orinda Watershed headquarters with a tour of San Pablo Reservoir, or we could hold one at one of our facilities or active construction project sites to demonstrate how we invest in our infrastructure. Next slide, please. So this slide gives you an idea of some of the topics that would be covered in each session. So we would start with an history and overview of East Bay MUD. We would talk about our investments in infrastructure. As I mentioned, we would maybe do a tour of our wastewater treatment plant and talk about resource recovery. We'd want to highlight environmental stewardship, sustainability, and innovation, and also talk about financial stewardship, community commitment, and then have a wrap-up ceremony at the end. Next slide, please. And finally, after the pilot ends, we would want to use the lessons learned to plan and develop an actual broader Community Water Academy program going forward. We would conduct an exit survey of the program participants and the staff that played a key role in the coordination and development of the pilot program to get a sense of what worked and what didn't work. And we would use those lessons learned to refine the broader program. An important component in refining the broader program would be to develop criteria and an application process for selecting future participants. And this is something that will be informed by the pilot and we would want to solicit board feedback from in the future. Also, our thinking is that we would be holding the community water program every 2 years, depending on the success of the pilot program. So with that, we'd love to hear any feedback and answer any of the questions you might have.
Director Young?
Got that mute button stuck again, Marguerite.
Having real trouble with the mute button today. I think it's a great program. I've been thinking of actually a lot about the sort of selection recruitment aspect of who should go or be in this first pilot. And since it is a pilot, I'd actually encourage it to be as diverse a group as possible, rather than being relatively homogenous. So it'd be good to have somebody from an NGO or 2. It would be good to find an elected official who is willing to do it. It'd be good to find somebody from a public works department, et cetera. But just to really, somebody who's perhaps, from one of the school districts, right, who would have an education interest, or so I think rather than thinking, oh, it's board members pick 2 people from their ward, is to actually really think about what's, how do we put together a very diverse pilot group for the first segment, just kind of, to test it. Who's benefiting from this? The other reaction that I had was around this idea that it's a place to recruit new board members, is that starts to feel like we're handpicking successors, which I have some issues about. That it's an insiders, becomes an insider's game, and that, if you're an ambassador at East Bay Mud, you have a better shot at getting elected. Now, it's probably true that if you became an ambassador at East Bay Mud, it would help you get elected. However, the idea that there's some kind of, and I know that's not the pilot project, but in fact, I sort of expressly selected my, alternates with the idea that they probably wouldn't be directors if they had their druthers. There's one who had expressed an interest previously, but I'll sort of stop there, but I think we really need to make it as diverse as possible.
All right, John.
Great, thank you, Doug. First, I want to give huge kudos to Clifford and the Public Information Office on this. I raised this several years ago, and actually I was thinking about using my campaign funds when I didn't run to sponsor one similar to this. So now that's not the situation, but I think this is a great idea. I agree with Marguerite's thing from diversity is important to get their input back from people. I know other agencies do it, and I just think this is a great way for people to learn the details on how we operate and why we operate the way we operate. If they become an ambassador and perhaps eventually decide to run for the board, so much the better. But having more people understanding what we face as board members and the staff, I think is critical for the future of East Bay Mud. So kudos to Clifford and the Public Information Office for putting this together.
All right, thank you, John. Frank?
I seem to remember way back when I had more hair in my head that I wound up attending a class like that. So Catherine and Mona, I'd suggest you look through the old records going back to 92 or so. There may be a program that was there, because I distinctly remember going to classes. Secondly, Marguerite's right, but if I were to suggest, I think it helps the board members to look at people who have shown an interest in their particular ward. And I can think of two people right off, one that's a MAC member and one that is a member of an important member of the Chamber of Commerce in the Castro Valley area. And they're from different parts of my ward, but I think that should be inherent in us making that choice. But yes, it's long overdue, and John and I had talked about it years ago, but I just wanted you guys to know that there's something there in the old archives. You might shake out a lot of dust before you find it, because there's nothing worse than reinventing the wheel. So,
but back when you took it, you might need to reinvent the wheel. You're still using the pen and quill, right? We have computers now, Frank. So,
or the boat pedal, as it were.
Yeah, right.
Giving it its water. Okay, thank you. And the only other thought, if it's going to be a pilot program and you got it pretty well put together, why not get it started maybe June 1st or July 1st?
I think that's about what we're targeting. Yeah, we're looking at this summer in June and July.
Cool.
Yeah.
Great idea, guys.
Thank you.
All right, Bill.
Yeah, I was recalling every time we put something up that we think is brand new, I can go back in history and say, yes, it is, and it's great to put forward. We've had motion in that direction in the past. I remember when I came on board, and I'm going to be brief this time, when I came on board, they were opening fire hydrants all around Oakland.
Oh, yeah.
Nobody had guts enough to stand up to the action that was going on until I got together with our public information officers, Greg Chan and others. And we put together a program that ultimately led to police and fire, people being deputized to intercede. And we turned the tide. They made it like it was a joyous occasion to open a fire hydrant and flood the streets. Actually put people's lives in jeopardy because cars and anything else approaching that were in danger. And I just wanted to, if anybody's left around that was part of that cadre, congratulate them and let them know that we finally arrived. But we stopped all that. Can you imagine what would happen during a drought if they were still carrying on in that fashion? And we united the community. We had everybody from senior citizens down to the kids working on the effort. And that was one of the achievements that I was given some special recognition on. I think the second thing is in terms of the interns in the programs from EBMUD, we've always had a dangle out there, and the intern program grew during my time. It also is a forerunner, and it has enabled several people to come into the district and be employed from that program, and really attracted the attention because so many of our youth didn't know what it was to work in a water agency or a wastewater operation. And I just wanted to make sure as we go forth, we remember that history, incorporate it into what we're doing now, and have a place that we can go to thanks to all of you who participated and for Clifton for bringing this forward.
All right, thanks, Bill. Andy?
Yes, thank you for bringing this proposal to the board. I think it looks great, and I support the comments of my colleagues, particularly those of Director Young, about broad recruitment and diverse cohort. I'd love to see actually the people who are getting engaged and learning about the district actually teaching us and informing us about how can we improve our public outreach in general, and to provide meaningful suggestions for what kinds of programs and considerations we would take back to the agency. So I hope that it can be actually useful engagement with the public as a focus group, as well as actual education of stakeholders of the district who will be active constituents who continuing to provide the district feedback. I hope that we can invest in an informed community and get benefits of that investment through people who will continue to share information with their community members, as well as provide feedback to the board in public comment or in other ways.
All right, thanks, Andy. Lisa?
I love the idea. And I don't know if it was Mona or Catherine who talked about other agencies that are doing this.
Catherine.
Could you talk a bit more about what other agencies?
Yeah, so specifically, I've been talking with Dublin San Ramon Services District and also Central San, who has a really well-developed program. Both of theirs are slightly different. So DSRSD does theirs every 2 years, which is kind of what we're proposing right now. Central San actually does theirs every year. And we've been just kind of in communication about what their application process is and what their overall program is, program budget, et cetera. So we've been looking to them for some guidance.
Well, I love the idea. Anytime we can get the community to learn more about their water, it's always a great idea. And I agree with Marguerite and my other colleagues that it should be a diverse group. Hopefully not just retirees who can, who can get on the freeway every evening, to come to Oakland. We need really a diverse group, even from those who work. And I love the idea about public works employees for cities. That makes so much sense to me. And so I love it. Love it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. I don't have anything to add. I think we covered it. Great idea. Make sure we have a diverse recruitment, and let's go with it. Sounds great.
Oh, and by the way, there's nothing wrong with retirees. It's just understood.
By the way,
Age
when you talk
discrimination.
about the DSRSD program, for as long as they had it, when they wound up with districts, they still had a difficult time finding somebody to run for an open seat. Which is, you would have thought it'd be easier, and I don't know. It's a surprise to me. So I thought that may alleviate some folks' mind as to whether we're grooming or not. There's no guarantee.
Was that the purpose of it, Frank?
Yeah, that's what I was
Well,
gonna ask.
no, it was along the lines that both Catherine and Mona have been talking about, and they've been doing it for a long time. And they were stunned that while they've been doing it for all this time, nobody stepped up to the plate. They actually had to do an appointment to fill the seat. It just,
Frank,
they thought it would be easier.
You might always remember that sometime if you develop something that has a broad purpose moving in a direction, the outcomes are what you find. The ones who are most gifted and the ones who continue on. Taking people to the next level is always an accomplishment. And
Yeah.
as they get there, they make their own goals to go higher. And they do that through the encouragement of the people who enrich the program and conduct the program. So I just want to give you, I'm an old coach. So every time I get a chance, I try to bring these facts out. And that's how you develop a core. And our staff is hit on it. So the byproducts of this program can be manyfold beyond East Bay Mud Board.
I see Kelly sitting there in the background, and thank you, Kelly, for giving your staff the go to go do this.
Okay, thank you, Mona, and thank you, Catherine, and thank you, Kelly, and thank you, the board, for all your feedback. Kelly, would you like to say something?
Just thanks for the great feedback, and we appreciate your support.
Bet.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Okay, moving on. Next May will be East Bay Mud's 100-year anniversary, and our plans for the Centennial is our next topic for discussion. The Centennial is going to focus on our mission and the work that we do to support the community and protect the environment. We have incorporated the feedback that we heard from the board last year, which is to make sure that we reflect on our past, both good and bad, share our vision for the future, engage the community in the work that we do, and ensure that the products that we develop for the Centennial can be reused and repurposed beyond just the day of the event. We're looking for some additional feedback as we finalize our plans, and we have Tracy Morales, our public information representative, to make the presentation.
Good afternoon, Board President Linney, members of the board, and General Manager Chan. Today I'll present an overview of plans and activities related to our Centennial to mark this important moment in our history. There are 468 days until May 22nd, 2023, but this isn't about one single day. This will be a year-long Centennial campaign to tell our story in ways that we haven't before and in ways that build our legacy and inspire our community. Next slide, please. We will tell our story through foundational messaging that highlights why we do, and how we do it. We are dedicated to our community and the environment. The district was in large part formed to address unsafe and unreliable water supplies at the turn of the century in the East Bay. And now we are driven to provide high quality water and wastewater services to safeguard public health and the environment. That is why we do what we do. We protect watersheds, the San Francisco Bay, and provide high quality water and wastewater to the community. That's what we do. And we invest in our employees, our infrastructure, and our community. That's how we do it and how we're planning for the future. Next slide, please. To guide our efforts in planning Centennial activities and events, we've developed 3 planning principles to ensure that our actions are sustainable. This celebration will focus on experiences and shared knowledge. We've listened to the board to ensure that activities are scaled appropriately and that materials that we develop can be repurposed after the Centennial. Engagement. Our Centennial celebration is a milestone for the whole community. We want events and activities to be fun, engaging, and educational. And finally, community focused. This is our moment to let the community know that we are part of the East Bay and that our employees reflect our diverse community and we play an important role in service to all of our customers. Next slide, please. As part of this year-long Centennial campaign, we will weave in the past, present, and the future, and will infuse these messages throughout our channels and platforms. The visual cornerstone will be a Centennial Year logo, a historical video, and a digital flip book. We'll also develop a media strategy that highlights infrastructure, innovation, and environmental stewardship. We'll roll out these platforms we'll roll out these messages and our themes on platforms, including our website, publications, signage, billboards, and of course, our internal communications. Next slide, please. East Bay Med's employees will play an important role in shaping the Centennial. We know that there's a great deal of excitement around the Centennial, and we want to weave in ideas from staff as we fine-tune this plan and gain staff participation as we do historical research, develop outreach ideas, and find ways to infuse the Centennial within internal activities, such as the general manager's town halls, engineers forums, and Splashes, our internal newsletter. We'll also be inviting the board, both present and past, retirees, and current staff to participate in video, oral interviews, as well as photography. Next slide, please. We'll be developing a calendar of events that are fun and engaging. And to give you a flavor of some of these ideas, they include facility tours, such as our treatment plants, and give people an inside perspective into spaces and places they might not have had access to. Community events, art contests, commemorative tree plantings on our watershed, a time capsule, a selfie station, and if you can imagine some type of commemorative sign at our reservoirs, prompting visitors to take photos and post those photos on social media to create buzz around our Centennial, as well as guided trail hikes. Next slide, please. To build on our existing partnerships and underscore our role as an economic driver in the region, we will plan on conducting outreach and identifying partnerships with businesses and entities that are rooted in the East Bay, such as schools and universities, businesses, healthcare, restaurants, specialty item businesses. And our goal is that by this time next year, we'll be celebrating over Centennial branded bagels and beers. Next slide, please.
Tracy, could I just ask on that last one? I just wanted to get clear on you reaching out to them to have joint branding, or what's the point?
To develop some type of partnership that acknowledges our East Bay Med Centennial. There are examples of that with being able to highlight how East Bay Med improves these businesses. For instance, the Centennial Zoo has partnered with various entities around the East Bay to highlight their Centennial, such as a beer, commemorative foods.
Great. Okay, thank you.
We're also proposing.
Can I ask a further thing along that line? Is this going to be like sponsorships that they could be a partner? In other words, They have something, congratulations, East Bay Mud from San Leandro Chamber of Commerce or something along that line.
Well, I think it's still being fine-tuned, but we do have a sponsorship plan in place. But this would be outreach that we would be doing to see how we can partner, and it would be some of the kind of the more commemorative type events where we can partner, but we would be doing some type of sponsorship activities as well.
If that would help lessen the cost, you've got my attention.
Frank, let me add on to what you just said. We have much to join us in this celebration of entities in and out of the district itself. For example, I think of how we get other entities involved in helping us with our celebration or invite them to have a share. Of course, there's East Bay Regional Park, just to talk about down here on the ground. But there's also our facilities up at Pardee, our facilities at the fish hatchery, all of them that they encompass, and the agencies that work with us there. The work we do on the watershed, the reforestry operations, all should be given a buy-in to Freeport to what we're doing, because our borders expand extensively, and that history needs to be brought into the celebration of our accomplishment over time. I just mentioned that the length and the breadth of this district is so great. I'm sure the partners would want to join in with us. And that gives even the state an opportunity to do something as it helps us celebrate our time. Did you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, now I'm
Yep.
all done.
All right, thanks, Bill.
I just think I wanted to offer a broadening the partnerships that can help celebrate us in our 100 years. We have a lot of accomplishment that occurred over that time.
Why don't you keep going, Tracy?
In addition, we're also proposing an update to the administrative building lobby and to find ways to creatively tell our story in a more engaging way and to optimize this underutilized space. We're currently assessing the available space to determine what's feasible, and our goal is to present an RFP this summer for the design and installation of an educational exhibit. Next slide, please. Our goal is to build on our existing education program and build on our community outreach. We'd like to create a space that can be integrated into the forthcoming Community Water Academy, to create a space for school tours and a welcoming place for the general public. We'd like for this educational exhibit to be interactive and engaging and touch on themes such as where your water comes from, the water treatment process, the wastewater treatment process, conservation, environmental stewardship, and more. And the example that's featured here is of an educational exhibit that features the water cycle, and it's located at a water treatment plant in Minnesota. Next slide, please. And this is the timeline of our work plan. The first half of this year, we're focused on developing agreements for the board's review for professional service agreements for the development of a video, a digital flipbook, other digital assets, as well as the AB lobby update. In the second half of the year, we'll be focused on producing and finalizing these assets, finalizing the design for the AB lobby, conducting partner outreach, setting the events calendar as well. And then at the beginning of 2023, we'll weave in these Centennial themes throughout our messaging, communications, and publications. We'll launch the Centennial logo, release the video flipbook, and information on our website, as well as holding community events throughout the year and throughout the service area. And then May will really be the pinnacle in the campaign. We'll be holding community events, promoting partnerships, and unveiling the AB lobby update. Next slide, please. As you can see, there's a great deal of activities underway and a great deal of work ahead, and we're excited to partner with the community to engage and educate members of our community about water and this important moment in our history. And I'm happy to take your questions.
Good. Good. Good.
President Lenny, we have one hand for public comment. Did you want to take that before or after the board comments and questions?
Let's go ahead and take it now.
Okay. Kelly A., you should be able to unmute your mic, and your 3 minutes will start now.
Thank you. I'd like to second what Director Patterson was just saying. He understood the broad nature of any urban water system. These urban watersheds are huge. Some of the water you can produce locally, but any large urban area in the U.S., like New York City or East Bay Mud or anybody, has a huge footprint that extends out, in the case of East Bay Mud, out to the Sierra foothills and out to the watershed of the Sacramento River. In the case of New York City, out to the Catskills. And the ratio, people don't appreciate how huge the water that they're drawing in is. It's like a ratio of 10 to 1 or something, where for every square mile in the urban area, you're sucking out water from a watershed, from 10 times that much watershed or whatever. It's a large. It's way more land is being used to supply the water to the urban region. And so the interconnectedness, the broad footprint, the huge impact of urban areas. It's not just East Bay Mud; it's all the urban areas. That needs to be appreciated, such that provincialism and territoriality on the part of the board or on the part of the customers, where people think that our little people, 1.5 million or however many million people there, are the only people that count, is not going to fly very well. It's not going to work politically. It's not going to work even from the viewpoint of water, because urban areas need those huge footprints. They need huge watersheds to survive, and you're going to have to deal with all the rural people or outside people that are out there supplying your water. It's just how it is, and that's the reality. And territoriality is not going to fly. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Board comments, feedback?
Boy, went to sleep. Where are they?
Does this need any emotion for approval or anything?
No, no emotions necessary for this. This is just our second time coming back to the board, just sharing with you the revised plans based on feedback that we heard last year, and just wanted to make sure that we were hitting the mark.
Good.
Nice presentation,
Yes,
Tracy.
seems like it's hitting the mark, in my opinion. I like it.
Okay.
Looks like that whole team down there in government affairs, public relations has got a very busy year set out for them.
Well, we thank Kelly and her entire team for all the work that they do to make us talk about all the things that we do. So thank you for that. I have two more items or presentations. So the next one is a coronavirus update. As I mentioned earlier, the COVID numbers have significantly improved since the surge last month, and we have Dave Briggs here, Director of Operations and Maintenance, to provide the coronavirus update.
Clifford. Good afternoon, President Linney, members of the board. So we'll take a few minutes here to provide a little bit more detail on our response to the pandemic. And as Clifford mentioned here on slide 2, we're showing the positive cases in Alameda County and Contra Costa County. And as rapid of an increase that we saw in late December, we're luckily seeing a rapid decrease now. The wastewater, the COVID and wastewater numbers are more or less at numbers that are reflective of the lowest levels of intensity of the pandemic. So the wastewater numbers are looking good. The positivity rates are half what they were a few weeks ago. So all trends in the right direction. And this is also consistent with the district's data, which is shown on slide 3. So at this point, we do have 418 confirmed employee positives. We had 6 over the past few days. But the thing to point out is that the intensity of this surge, which is shown in blue in the bottom graphic there, that 1 month period from late December into late January. So in the middle of January, as I reported a couple weeks ago, we were seeing 8, 9, 10, and I think on one day 12 positive cases. About 2 weeks ago, that number dropped to 4, 5, 6 a day. And just in the last 4 days, our positivity rate among employees is closer to 1, 2, or 3. So everything's going the right direction there, but we did have about 241 in that 1 month period beginning in late December. We are continuing to get all of our important work done. Employees are getting back to work. We have testing available. We have the shorter quarantine and isolation periods, which is very helpful, and things are looking good there. About 50 people are not reporting to work. These are people who are unable to telecommute. That number has decreased and continuing to decrease. So things are heading in the right direction. And we know of no employee who's been hospitalized with COVID so far.
Excuse me, David, there's been no employee during this entire time that's been hospitalized with COVID?
At the present time, there's no employee.
At present time, okay.
Yeah, sorry, I need to clarify that.
Okay, thank
There
you.
have been a handful over the past 2 years, Director Coleman. Okay, so as Director Coleman mentioned, and Clifford also mentioned as well in his remarks, we really are at an inflection point, I think, in the management of the pandemic. The state has made all sorts of signals in the last couple of weeks. The governor and legislature have finished a bill that would provide up to 80 hours of paid sick leave for COVID-related reasons. That may be signed into law any day now. The legislature is also working on an amendment to the workers' comp presumption of work-based exposure that would otherwise expire on January 1st, 2023. That could be extended for 2 more years. That's still in the legislature. The governor's also made various announcements, as Clifford mentioned, the so-called endemic plan, which I can't wait to see, may daylight here in a week or two, and also face coverings or masks. The state is preparing to rescind the statewide mandate, but keep in mind the district is still bound by local county health ordinance and also OSHA, so it's unclear when any changes would be made at the district, but you can see where the state is going. So other information on this slide, just to round out what we're all working on, we have implemented, as I mentioned, the shorter isolation and quarantine periods. The state paid leave package also has obligations on the employer for testing, but by and large, we're already providing that testing. It's mostly related to getting employees back to work, and we have a pretty extensive plan already or program in place. Additional leave, we have made additional leave available for employees to either get a booster or to isolate or quarantine based on various circumstances, but all of this leave is consistent with what the state is proposing, and then some. The state is proposing a much broader availability of COVID-related leave, very similar to SB 95 last year, far more expansive than what the district is proposing. As I mentioned, our testing is very elaborate, 5 days a week, 5 sites. That might decrease in the next few weeks as our infection rate begins to drop, which it is. And I think prior discussion on the return to work, I did want to make mention that, and I think Clifford said this, that this is the first phase. So not everybody's coming back to the office on February 28th. We're expecting and welcoming people 1 to 2 days a week as a first step towards returning to work. So not everybody's coming back that week or that day. It'll take quite some time, and that's just the first step. And that's, yes, and other than just continuing to remind everybody to follow the rules and stay safe, that's essentially the update I have for you. Thank you.
Director Mellon?
2 things real quick. Local CVS stores is giving out the N95 masks when you do shopping, free, which is pretty interesting. But also, I think in terms of the separation, so maybe I should ask this of you, Clifford. if I wanted to show up for the board meeting on the 22nd at the boardroom, would that be all right?
It would be fine.
Okay, because I want to show a degree of support for our employees that if we're asking them to come back, I wouldn't ask of them anything less than I would ask of myself.
Okay, I don't see any other hands, so thank you, Dave, for that update. The last presentation is our water supply update. I think everybody knows January was dry. I believe it was the third driest on record in the McCollum. Late last month, forecasts were pointing to possibly a shift to a wetter pattern in February. That didn't materialize. And certainly the near-term forecast that Dave will share with you doesn't look like there's any wet weather either. That said, as we've shared with the board in past meetings, we are prepared as dry weather continues. And Dave Briggs will provide the full water supply update.
Okay, thank you, Clifford. Good afternoon again. So we'll get right into this update. I was sitting there reflecting a minute ago that about a month ago, I was giving you really dire news about COVID and really great news about water supply, and now everything's different. Everything's opposite. So maybe in March, everything will be good. Okay, so yeah, just a brief outline of what I'm going to cover. I will update the board on our supplemental water operations, which have changed a little bit over the past couple of months. And I'll go ahead and start off with that. So in the end of December, we had our second batch of atmospheric rivers, which came through Central and Northern California, and we were looking very good. We were running out of storage locally and getting several feet of snow upcountry in the McCallum. So at that time, we suspended Freeport operations, and at the same time, we requested that the Bureau of Reclamation allow us to take our contract year 2021 CVP supply and allow us to divert that into the next contract year, which begins on March 1st, 2022. They subsequently approved that request, so it gave us a lot of flexibility to take a wait and see approach, because at that point in time, things were looking very good with the availability from Mother Nature. We wouldn't need the CVP supply. However, as Clifford mentioned, and as I'm sure you've experienced, January and February have been really record-breaking dry in many ways. And so in response, we turned Freeport on actually this morning. And we will be moving water to USL as well later in the week on Friday. And we've made a point to work with Kelly's folks, Catherine, I think specifically, to make sure that Moraga is aware that those pumps may start to operate later in the week. And last, so where are we? We moved almost 21,000 acre feet through nearly the end of December. We have about a little over 14,000 to move in February and March. So we're beginning to do that. And then our contract year 22 supply, which is independent of what we're getting in 2021, we will possibly get a glimpse of what Reclamation's plans are for its contractors, maybe next week, maybe in a week or two. We're not expecting great news, but that remains to be seen. And of course, if it does turn wet, which is when I'll get to in a minute, there still is a good probability that that could happen. We will suspend the supplemental water operation if the hydrology does turn better in our favor here. Okay, so now, well, after I get through water production, I'll get into the hydrology, which has not been good. But first, just looking at water production. So we saw in December, really the lowest water production we've seen in a very long time, as we had a wet and cold December. And then as we've left that year and entered January and now February, its production has rapidly climbed. It's above last year at this point. And I believe February right now is tracking about 7% above last February. But overall, we're still about 9% below overall for this fiscal year. But yeah, demand and water production have been responding to the warm weather we've been having for the past 6 weeks. Okay, so now the difficult news. Well, we're all still above average for which is good, but January and February have been very, very dry. Independently looking at January and February would give you impressive statistics with how dry January was, and then independently looking at February as well. But the two of them together right now, especially looking at the 2-week forecast, which is not good, we could be looking at the driest January and February we've ever recorded in the McKelvey watershed. So we truly are looking for a miracle March at this point. But that being said, as bad as it has been, we are technically still above average up there with a pretty good snowpack. Similar situation here locally. We're still above average, but we haven't recorded anything in the month of February. I think San Francisco just set a record for the largest number of days in succession without precipitation in the middle of winter. But yeah, it's been a long time since it's rained. Snowpack is about 70% of average at this point, but still pretty good water content up there. So even though it's been so dry, it is somewhat helpful to know that we're still relatively close to average there, and there is still time to turn things around. Storage, we're at 523,000 acre feet in the entire system. That is up from 515 about 2 weeks ago, so we are building storage. The hole we need to fill is in Comanche. It was at about 50% a couple weeks ago. It's up to 53 now, so we're trying to get water down there for a variety of reasons, and that's really the hole we want to fill. Not surprising, the statewide picture here, the Sierra Nevada is below average in terms of water content, pretty much up and down. Probably no surprise there. And I think Clifford was also mentioning this as well, that when we look at the climatology models, which do have some reasonably good news, the white area is shown there, which is most of Central and Northern California. Based on this model outlook for February, March, and April, there is an equal chance that we could be around normal for the remaining part of the winter and the spring. But at the same time, this news is reasonably good. We also know that these climatology models are very, very, there's not much trust we can put into them. They're not very accurate. Okay, so just the final two slides here, looking at where we are with precipitation. 30 inches up in the McKelvey watershed, about 6 weeks where we've basically been flatlined there. But statistically speaking, for the rest of the water year in the McKelvey watershed, there is still a very good chance that we'll get 5-10 inches up there and approach an average level of precipitation. Normally, I think the driest January 1st to June 30th period we've ever seen in the McKelvey watershed yielded 10 inches. That's the driest we've ever seen. So there's still statistically a good chance that we'll pick things up in the watershed and edge up closer to a median level of precipitation up there. And then finally, just looking at our system storage and the projection out to the end of the water year, you can see where we are right now at 525,000 acre feet. The 90% exceedance, the dry forecast has it at 515,000 acre feet. However, if I look out at 2 weeks, or I get a little pessimistic and assume that we're not going to get anything in February, that number drops below 500,000 under the 90% exceedance. So we still have several months of precipitation to come and time to turn things around, but the next 2 or 3 weeks don't look very promising. And that's what I have.
Are there any questions for Dave on this? Okay, thank you, Dave. Last is the monthly report is, Director
Bill, I
Patterson.
see your hand.
Yeah, one thing, and we don't need to get into this today, it's too late. But sometime I'd like to have another session so that we can talk about kind of where we are. Our water projection, sales, for example, is consumption is down and the sales are down. Ultimately, our revenue is down. And so for all the things that people are dreaming about, staff concerns, these have to be brought on board in the mix in some of our future meetings, because we have to predict where we're going with the climate change and the impact it's having and going to have, and the economic fallout of all of that is what we ultimately get caught with. And that's where we get into this whole thing of gentrification, and it's affecting everything and everybody at all levels throughout the state. And we need to make sure as we go forward, we have a conversation about this. So it's in our planning, because this is what we have ahead of us. And we have done extensive work to identify multiple sources of water. If we're not allowed to use it to the fullest, then we can't fill the need. My concept has always been, no matter what the condition, we would have enough water to take care of the needs of all the people that we represent here. So I want to keep throwing that out so we keep that conversation moving.
Thank you, Director Patterson. Just for the board to know that we are going to be coming up at the next meeting with our long-term water supply workshop. So we'll have an opportunity to share with you our planning and our continued planning to build our resilient water supply. And also in the monthly report, we do have our revenue summary. So as of today, we are still slightly higher than our budgeted revenue, but that's in part because we got a one-time payment from Chevron. And with that, I'll just say that I attached is the monthly report, and so if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. I see nothing, so I am done with my reports.
All right, thank you, Clifford. We now move on to reports and director comments. Committee reports minutes from the January 25th, 2022 Sustainability Energy Committee are included in the agenda packet. We will now receive reports from this morning's Customer Assistance Program workshop and the February 7th DERWA meeting. And I'll report for the Customer Assistance Program workshop that we received an overview this morning of the district's 2021 CAP activities, also the overall customer support program, including COVID-19 impacts to district customers, the utility arrearage relief programs for drinking water and wastewater services, implementation of CAP for the cities, sewer collection charges, ongoing efforts to support the unhoused community, plans for a sustainable source of non-rate revenue to support CAP, and recommendations to ensure the long-term success of CAP. Frank, do you want to give a report on DERWA?
Sure.
Doug,
Yes.
you mentioned the $10 million that we got that's helping that program. I want to make sure.
Very important, yes.
I'm the finance guy, you know.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Thanks, Phil.
Clifford.
Go ahead,
Okay,
Frank.
DERWA. So last night was a fairly short meeting. We did need to do the annual election of the officers, and I gave up my rank as chair and president to Marisol Rubio from DERWA, which is part of the normal rotation system. And John Coleman graciously accepted the role of vice president. And so next year's officers are Marisol Rubio from DSRSD and John Coleman as vice president. We also took a look at some of the planning and things that are forthcoming. You know, a lot has changed. 2 years ago, we were in a situation where DSRSD was having a really serious level of turnover amongst its managers. And so even though it was their turn in the rotation to be manager of the DERWA project, they just didn't have anybody to spare. And that's when we did a limited term hiring of an outside manager. Well, now they do have somebody to spare, and the contract on the outside manager will expire come June, and we're going to get back into the rotation again. So DSRSD will be for lack of a better term, the general manager of DERWA for the next 2 years, and then it'll rotate back to EBMUD. And that's what we had. And quite frankly, the things that are changing, our staff and DSRSD staff are both saying the same things, that they're working on a lot of stuff. And the 3-year extension is going to turn out to be very helpful to laying the framework for the next long-term JPA agreement. And that's the report from the DERWA meeting.
Thank you, Frank. Please submit any items for future consideration to the general manager. Are there any director comments? Okay. Then we will close today's meeting in honor of former East Bay MUD Board Director David Richardson, who passed away on February 6th. As a Berkeley resident, David was elected to the in November 1998 to represent Ward 4, which at the time included the cities of Albany, Berkeley, El Cerrito, Emeryville, Kensington, and Rockridge neighborhood of Oakland. While on the board, he chaired the Legislative Human Resources Committee and the Finance Administration Committee, and contributed to the work of other board committees. He served on the board for 2 terms, retiring in December 2006.
Doug, can I add a couple comments on David? Because I had the pleasure of being an employee in employee relations when David was the president of 444.
You want to hold those till I finish these and add those?
Oh, I'm
or-
sorry. I thought you were. I apologize.
It's okay. David lived a long and fruitful life, so there's much to cover here still. But
beg
we
your
welcome comments from any other board members for anything that we may have missed here. Of course, he was very involved in the labor perspective on issues before East Bay MUD, both as a board member and during his employment as East Bay MUD storekeeper from 1981 to 1996, during which time he served as an American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, otherwise known as AFSCME, Local 444 officer, including several years as president and as an elected executive board member of AFSCME District Council 57. He also supported and encouraged many district programs and services such as affirmative action, workplace safety, employee development, the SEP program, and efforts to ensure equitable contract opportunities for minority and women-owned businesses, and was a longtime environmental advocate, serving as a founding member and first director of the South County Ecology Center that operated the first recycling station in southern Alameda County, and actively supporting a wide range of environmental programs. David's family and friends remember him for his commitment to social justice, his love of good friends and good food, the San Francisco Opera, photography, travel, and the ability to bring both fun and kindness where he went. And I would just say, from a personal note, David was instrumental to me getting on this board, encouraging me and supporting my campaign, as well as helping me show the ropes at East Bay MUD. And so miss him greatly. Yeah, Frank?
So I was newly hired at East Bay MUD, and we were recovering from a break in one of the aqueducts. And David and I wound up negotiating a equitable settlement because David was willing to be creative, and I was given a pretty free hand to be creative. And so as a result, there was almost 30 employees had a pay claim in. And we were able to resolve 100% of those pay claims with the agreement of 100% of those employees. And that earned my respect of him because we both understood it had to be something fair. Later on, we had a similar situation with uniforms. And again, David's creativity and intelligence was astonishing in terms of his willingness to roll up his sleeves and get at it. Something that I found to be unusual in the public sector. And then I would leave with one last thing. If your computer was ever broke or the software was ever running amok, David could fix it. He was a definite propeller head. He could have worked in our IT department without any effort whatsoever. He was quite a fellow, and will be missed. And I do admire, and I'm glad John Hayden brought it to our attention because I hadn't heard that David had passed.
Doug sent us an email.
Bill.
I just wanted to, this cane is what David brought me back
I remember
from
that.
South America from his vacation. He, much like you, Marguerite, he traveled worldwide. And, you know, this is the relationship we built. He didn't bring everybody back something from his vacation, but he brought me this during the time that I could barely walk after surgery. And I've always kept it to remember him by.
Oh, that's great.
And I would just say likewise for me, Dave was always prepared with insights about East Bay Mud and was a big booster of my candidacy. And even though he had moved to Aptos by that time, you know, remember him with, you know, much kindness and goodwill towards all East Bay Mud, the whole East Bay Mud family. So wish him well in the next plane.
Look out, God, you got a negotiator coming.
As my immediate predecessor, David was someone who I think was always prepared to be preparing his successor. He saved up, I kid you not, probably about 10 or more boxes. Frank is nodding because we share an office, and you know, we spent a few times getting coffee and talking about his time at the district and his interests and hopes for the district in the future. He really kept the district close to his heart and had so many expectations for, and goals that I think he continued to hold dear. He gave me those boxes and urged me to read everything in them.
There's at least 3 still in the office.
Yeah, which I eventually did, and I've kept a smaller portion of papers for you know, for the legacy of who represents Ward 4. But I you know, really took to heart you know, everything he did to you know, guide the process for succession. Unfortunately, I didn't have the pleasure of knowing him very well during his years of service or his years at the district, like Frank and others did. But I did get to know him in that process, and I appreciate him very much.
If I can
May I
say,
add?
go for
go
it,
ahead,
Lisa.
John.
Go for it, Lisa.
He was just a lovely person, and my parrot is starting to chime in. Just a lovely person, and he had a wicked sense of humor, and he always had a twinkle in his eye. And he loved the district, and he loved working at the district, and he loved serving on the board. And I just wish his family the best when they're lost, because he's a loss to the world.
Thank you. If I can say something, I knew David as a result of when he was the president of 444, when I was on the board, then he came on the board. Now, we didn't always agree. That's probably an understatement. However, having said that, he was a gentleman and he was a scholar, and he always had a smile on his face. And as Lisa just said, a twinkle in his eye. You weren't quite sure what he was up to, but he was a class act, and he'll be missed. And I offer my condolences to he and his family for the loss, and as well the loss to the district as a result.
He was astonishingly much more conservative once he became a board member.
Well, thank you all for the tribute. I'm sure his family will appreciate that. So with that, the next board meeting will be held on Tuesday, February 22nd at 1:15 p.m. This meeting is now adjourned in honor of David Richardson.
Was there somebody else too, Doug?
Well, Joey Smith had asked that Sylvia Johnson get recognition, but of course we haven't considered that ahead of time. And I think there was one other person that Bill was going to we're going to put over to the next meeting for recognition. Okay. So
okay,
we're now adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.